Zelenskyy notably dressed formally, well aware appearances matter to Trump, who has been pushing for a ceasefire but wasn't able to secure one in that meeting with Putin. Let's listen in.
Very, very substantial progress in many ways. We had a good meeting, as you know, just a short while ago with the president of Russia. And I think there's a possibility that something could come out of it. And today's meeting is very important. We have, I guess, the seven very powerful leaders from Europe. And we're going to be meeting with them right after this meeting. And thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. If I can, first of all, thank you for invitation, and thank you very much for your efforts, personal efforts to stop killings and stop this war. Thank you. And using this opportunity, many thanks to your wife, First Lady of the United States. She sent a letter to Putin about our children, abducted children, and my wife, she, First Lady of Ukraine. She gave the letter. Right. It's not to you, to your wife.
Oh, I want
it. Yeah. So we're saying this sensitive topic, yes, please. And thanks to our partners, and that you supported this format, that after our meeting we can have leaders who are around us, UK and France, Germany, Italy, Finland, EU, NATO, I mean all partners around Ukraine supporting us. Thanks to them, and thank you very much for invitation.
Thank you very much for being here.
President Trump.
Do you think it's fair?
Yes, Peter, go ahead.
Thank you, President Trump. So, President Zelenskyy, you say in a post on X today, Russia must end this war, which it itself started. President Trump, you say President Zelenskyy of Ukraine can end the war with Russia almost immediately if he wants to. Which is it?
No, I think that's true. I think we're going to have a meeting. I think if everything works out well today, we'll have a trilat. And I think there will be a reasonable chance of ending the war when we do that.
And is this the end of the road for American support for Ukraine? Is today's meeting deal or no deal?
I can never say that. It's never the end of the road. People are being killed, and we want to stop that. So I would not say it's the end of the road. No, I think we have a good chance of doing it. It's been almost 4 years now that a lot of people were killed last week. A lot of people last week. I mean, millions of people killed, but a lot of people last week for whatever reason. A big number, a lot of soldiers, on both sides. And I know the president, I know myself, and I believe Vladimir Putin wants to see it ended.
And as you met with Putin on Friday, today you've got President Zelenskyy here. As you listen to Russia and Ukraine, which side has the better cards? Right?
Well, I don't want to say that. I'm just here to be. Look, this isn't my war. This is Joe Biden's war. He's the one that had a lot to do with this happening, and we want to get it ended. And we want it to end good for everybody. We want it to end good. The people of Ukraine have suffered incredibly.
President Zelenskyy, are you prepared to keep sending Ukrainian troops to their deaths for another couple years, or are you going to agree to redraw the maps?
Thank you for your question. So, first of all, we live under each day attacks. That today have been a lot of attacks and a lot of wounded people, and the child was dead, small one year and a half. So we need to stop this war, to stop Russia, and we need support American and European partners, and we will do our best for this. So, and I think we show that we are strong people, and we supported the idea of the United States, personally of President Trump, to stop this war, to make a diplomatic way of finishing this war, and we are ready for trilateral, as President said. This is a good signal about trilateral. I think this is very good. Thank you.
Mr. President.
Yes, if the peace deal will be achieved, are you going to be willing to send American peacekeepers to Ukraine?
Well, we're going to work with Ukraine. We're going to work with everybody, and we're going to make sure that if there's peace, the peace is going to stay long term. This is very long term. We're not talking about a 2-year peace and then we end up in this mess again. We're going to make sure that everything's good. We'll work with Russia. We're going to work with Ukraine, and we're going to make sure it works. And I think if we can get to peace, it's going to work. I have no doubt about it.
Your team has talked about security guarantees. Could that involve U.S. troops? Would you roll that out in the future?
We'll let you know that maybe later today. We're meeting with 7 great leaders of great countries also, and we'll be talking about that. They'll all be involved, but there'll be a lot of help when it comes to security. There's going to be a lot of help. It's going to be good. They are first line of defense because they're there. They're Europe, but we're going to help them out also. We'll be involved.
President, Vladimir Putin mentioned that the war will not end without addressing the root causes of this war. Have you had an understanding what are the root causes of this war?
Well, look, the war is going to end. When it ends, I can't tell you, but the war is going to end, and this gentleman wants it to end, and Vladimir Putin wants it to end. I think the whole world is tired of it, and we're going to get it ended. It was, I've done 6 wars. I've ended 6 wars, and I thought this maybe would be the easiest one, and it's not the easiest one. It's a tough one. A lot of reasons for it, and they'll be talking about it for a long time. But they'll be talking about the others. Look, India, Pakistan. We're talking about the big places. When you look at, you just take a look at some of these wars. You go to Africa and take a look at that. Rwanda and the Congo, Republic of the Congo. That's been going on for 31 years. And so we've done a total of 6, and we really have 6, not including the fact that we obliterated, and it turned out to be a total obliteration, the nuclear, as you said, the future nuclear capability of Iran. And this one, I think we're going to get solved also. I feel confident we're going to get it solved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Can you tell us about your conversations with European leaders and what they need to see to support an end to the war?
Yeah, well, we're going to be meeting with a great representative group and 7 very powerful, very big countries and great people, all friends of mine and friends of yours. And we're going to have some suggestions made. They want to see peace. They would like to see peace.
You said last
in the red.
President Trump, do you think it's fair for Ukraine and for Russia to achieve a lasting and durable peace if Ukraine cedes its territories that Russia hasn't yet conquered? Do you think it's a fair peace for Ukraine?
We're going to have a lasting peace. Just to answer the first part of your question, we're going to have a lasting peace. I hope it's going to be immediately. I hope it doesn't have to go on. And I think people of the whole world is going to be very happy when that's announced.
You posted on social media, Mr. President, a very touching letter from the First Lady. And the letter was hand-delivered to President Putin. And it calls for an end to the war, essentially, because of the children and the children's future. Why did the First Lady feel that letter was necessary? Was it because she believes that Mr. Putin is the aggressor in the war? Is a similar letter being hand-delivered to President Zelenskyy?
So the First Lady felt very strongly. She's watched the same thing that you watch and that I watch. I see things that you don't get to see, and it's horrible. But when she's got a great love of children, she has a wonderful son that she loves, probably more than anybody, including me. I hate to say it, but she loves her son. She loves children. And she hates to see something like this happening, and that goes for other wars too. I mean, she sees the heartbreak, the parents, the funerals that you see on television. Always funerals. We want to see something other than funerals. No, she felt it was a beautiful letter. It was very well received by him, and she did ask me to say, she would love to see this end. She would love to see it end, and she says it very openly, very proudly, and with great sorrow because so many people have been killed.
Mr. President, last week,
Brian, go ahead, Brian.
Yes, sir. I've got a question for each of you.
Yes.
First of all, President Zelensky, you look fabulous in that suit.
I said the same thing.
Yeah, you look good.
I said the same thing.
Yeah, looks good on
I
you.
said the one that attacked you last time. See, now he's I remember that.
Yeah, I apologize to you. You look wonderful. No, my first question for you, President Zelensky.
In the same suit. You see, I changed. You are not.
Maybe yours is much better. Real quickly, upon peace, God willing we get peace, are you open to holding an election in your country?
Yes, of course. We are open for election, yes. We have to do safety circumstances, and a little bit we need to work in the parliament, because during the war you can't have elections, but we can do security. We need, maybe, how to say, we need a truth, yes, everywhere, in the battlefield, in the sky, in the sea, yeah, to make possible for people to do democratic, open, legal elections.
So you say
we're ready.
during the war you can't have elections. So let me just say 3.5 years from now. So you mean if we happen to be in a war with somebody, no more elections? Oh, it's good. I wonder what the fake
You like this idea?
Yeah.
No.
Speaking of news, I got a question for you. This sounds insane for me even to ask this, but do you think the American media really doesn't even want a peace deal because they've been so critical of you every step of the way as you lead the charge for peace?
It's an amazing phenomenon. I said that if in the settlement you got Moscow, St. Petersburg, and thousands of miles around them, they would say I made a bad deal. The level of hatred and animosity is incredible. Not with all. I mean, we have great people up here. We also have terrible people up there that I think are told what to say. But, in solving all of these wars, they don't even write about it. I saw major wars. I saw wars that have been going on for 31, 35, and 37, and a couple of quicker ones. One that was going to go into a full-blown deal very quickly. You know, the one I'm talking about, it was a big one. But they don't even write about that. No matter what I do, no matter what, and this is not anything to do with you. It's probably to your advantage in a certain way. But no matter what I do, no matter what deal I make, from my standpoint, you'll come out good. Maybe President Putin will come out good. But they'll say, Trump was absolutely horrible. It's just that, and I've lived with that for a long time. I've lived with it since just before the first election. I used to get great publicity. Now I get the worst publicity anyone's ever gotten in office, but I won in a landslide, so that people understand. They're the only ones that count, ultimately. But I've also had great reporters. I've had journalists that are very good. But it's very sad when you do the right thing. As an example, they said, because of the fact that Vladimir Putin came to American soil, this was a tremendous defeat for Donald Trump. No, it was really wonderful that he did it. It was a hard thing for him to do, to be honest with you. It was the opposite of what they said, but they said it. Now, if he didn't come, they'd say that was also bad for Trump. There's no way. And there's just a great dishonesty of the press, and I think that's why it's lost its credibility. Its credibility is at an all-time low. We have a thing going on right now in D.C. We went from the most unsafe place anywhere to a place that now friends are calling me up, Democrats are calling me up, and they're saying, sir, I want to thank you. My wife and I went out to dinner last night for the first time in 4 years, and Washington, D.C. is safe, and you did that in 4 days. I'll tell you, it's safe. I had another friend of mine, he has a son who's a great golfer, he's on tour, and he came in fourth yesterday in the big tournament where Scotty Scheffler made the great shot, and he said his son is going to dinner in Washington, D.C. tonight. I said, would you have allowed that to happen a year ago? He said, no way, no way. He said, what you've done is incredible. And I think the people realize it. But the press says, he's a dictator, he's trying to take over. No, all I want is security for our people. But people that haven't gone out to dinner in Washington, D.C. in 2 years are going out to dinner. And the restaurants the last 2 days were busier than they've been in a long time.
Sir, I walked around yesterday with MTG. If you could walk around with D.C. with MTG and not be attacked, the city is safe.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Last week, you warned of what you called severe consequences if a 30-day ceasefire or any type of ceasefire were not agreed to by Russia. Will there be severe consequences? Does that change because of
I
your
don't
meeting
think
with
you need a
President Putin?
ceasefire. You know, if you look at the 6 deals that I settled this year, they were all at war. I didn't do any ceasefires. And I know that it might be good to have, but I can also understand strategically why, well, you know, one country or the other wouldn't want it. You have a ceasefire and they rebuild and rebuild and rebuild, and, you know, maybe they don't want that. But if you look at the 6 deals that we made peace and you know, long-term, long-running wars, I didn't do any ceasefires. Would I like the concept. You know, I like the concept of a ceasefire for one reason, because you'd stop killing people immediately, as opposed to in 2 weeks or 1 week or whatever it takes. But we can work a deal where we're working on a peace deal while they're fighting. They have to fight. I wish they could stop. I'd like them to stop. But strategically, that could be a disadvantage for one side or the other. But all of these deals I made without even the mention of the words ceasefire.
President Zelenskyy,
Can you explain the decision to offer Ukraine Article 5-like security guarantees, but stop short of pushing for their full membership?
Yeah, well, we haven't done anything on that yet. If you look back and you go back long before President Putin, it was always a statement that they would never allow Ukraine into NATO. So that was a statement that was made, but we haven't discussed any of that yet. We're going to be discussing it today. But we will give them very good protection, very good security. That's part of it. And the people that are waiting for us, they are, I think they're very like-minded. They want to help out all.
Thank you, President. Thank you, President Trump.
Are you disappointed there's no
The
ceasefire,
United States has already given hundreds of billions of dollars to this war effort in Ukraine. At best, it is a stalemate, and the killing continues. So, President Trump, how much more is the United States willing to give Ukraine? And President Zelensky, how much more do you want?
Well, I'll start off just by saying we're not giving anything now. We're selling weapons. This is something before, I guess the number is well over $300 billion. That was under Joe Biden, a corrupt politician, not a smart man, never was. By the way, go back 40 years. He was not a smart man 40 years ago either. But now he's in particular bad. This was done by a corrupt administration that shouldn't have been in, and frankly, if the right results of the election were given, if I were president, this war would have never taken place, and he would have been very happy, because he would have liked to have seen. I mean, they went through hell. He went through hell. This war would have never happened, and the people that were killed, a couple of million people, a lot of people with soldiers and everything else, and the people that have been displaced and forced into other areas and other countries because of what's happened, none of that would have happened. And I'm just saying that he was a horrible president, whether it was the borders or this. He was just a horrible, corrupt president.
Mr. President,
You want to
I can. Thank you so much. So first of all, we have possibility now to buy weapon from the United States. We are thankful for this program and this opportunity. We are thankful for Europe. They pay for this. And through NATO program, for example, Pearl and etc., we have some programs where we can have some money to finance this. And this is a part, I think, it's not a part for the war and to defend us. It also will be a part for security guarantees, to strengthen our army, to rearm Ukrainian army. This is very, very important. And it depends how much money we need to rearm. For example, the question of air defense, we spoke about it with President Trump, and I'm happy that we have now bilateral decisions and we work on it with production, American production. Nobody in Europe has so many air defense like Patriots, for example. We need it very much, and this is also about defending.
I think the good news, we make the best military equipment in the world by far. You mentioned the Patriots. How good are they?
Systems.
We have systems, they're literally 100% foolproof. And it's really like shooting two bullets, two bullets hitting each other in the air in a space like this. The chance is 100%. It's 99 to 100%. So we sell the equipment to NATO. And NATO does what, I don't know what the arrangement is that you have with, but I know that they want you to have the equipment. and we're getting the best equipment in the world, but they pay us for the equipment. Under Biden, it was just crazy what was going on. I believe the number is over 300. I think it could be $350 billion worth of equipment and money and everything else. And we've made more progress in settling this war in the last 2 months than they made in 4 years. This should have been settled a long time ago, but it should have never happened. Yeah, please.
Real quickly, you pushed out on social media.
All right, Brian, go first.
You pushed out on social media about doing away with mail-in ballots and potentially electronic voting machines. Can you expand on that and how important
Well, that's a very off-topic, just really quickly. Mail-in ballots are corrupt. Mail-in ballots, you can never have a real democracy with mail-in ballots. And we, as a Republican Party, are going to do everything possible that we get rid of mail-in ballots. We're going to start with an executive order that's being written right now by the best lawyers in the country to end mail-in ballots because they're corrupt. And do you know that we're the only country in the world, I believe, I may be wrong, but just about the only country in the world that uses them because of what's happened, massive fraud all over the place. The other thing we want change are the machines. For all of the money they spend, it's approximately 10 times more expensive than paper ballots. And paper ballots are very sophisticated with the watermark paper and everything else. We would get secure elections. We'd get much faster results. The machines, I mean, they say we're going to have the results in 2 weeks. With paper ballots, you have the results that night. Most people, but most people, many countries use paper ballots. It's the most secure form. So between paper ballots, very, very important, paper ballots, and I think maybe even more important, the mail-in voting. We're going to end mail-in voting. It's a fraud. If you have mail-in vote, even Jimmy Carter with this commission, they set it up. He said the one thing about mail-in voting, you will never have an honest election if you have mail-in. And it's time that the Republicans get tough and stop it because the Democrats want it. It's the only way they can get elected. Because with men and women's sports and with transgender for everybody and open borders and all of the horrible things, and now the new thing is they love crime. They're fighting me on the fact that I've made Washington, D.C. safe. We're not going to get mugged, beaten up, or killed like all the people you've been watching get so badly hurt. I'm glad, I hate to take your time with this, but I'm glad you asked me that question.
Sorry.
We're going to stop mail-in ballots because it's corrupt. You know, when you go to a voting booth and you do it the right way and you go to a state that runs it properly, you go in, they even ask me. They asked me for my license plate, for identity. I said, I don't know if I have it. They said, sir, you have to have it. I was very impressed, actually. But it's very hard to cheat with mail-in voting. As you know what happens in California, it's so corrupt, where some people get 5, 6, 7 ballots delivered to them. Now, we got to stop mail-in voting, and the Republicans have to lead the charge. The Democrats want it because they have horrible policy. If you have mail-in voting, you're not going to have many Democrats get elected. That's bigger than anything having to do with redistricting, believe me. And the Republicans have to get smart. We're not going to have a country. I said for a long time at rallies, you need borders and you need free and fair elections. Those two things, otherwise you don't have. We have strong borders now. In 90 days, Mr. President, we didn't have 0 in 3 months. Not one person came in illegally into our country. In fact, even I find that hard to believe, but it's run by a little bit of a liberal group that put out the numbers, so I guess it's, but 0, 0, and 0. You go back a year ago, 2 years ago, 3, millions of people poured into our country. It was terrible. Thank you very much.
Do you need from President Trump to be able to make a deal? Is it American troops, intelligence, equipment? What is it?
Everything. And really, it includes 2 parts. First, strong Ukrainian army. That's what I began to discuss with your colleagues. And it's a lot about weapon and then people and training missions and intelligence. And second, we will discuss with our partners. It depends on the big countries, on the United States, on a lot of our friends.
And Mr. President, are you willing to commit American troops to that NATO-like protection in order to get President Zelenskyy to a deal today?
Well, I don't know if you define it that way, but NATO-like, I mean, we're going to give, we have people waiting in another room right now. They're all here from Europe, biggest people in Europe, and they want to give protection. They feel very strongly about it, and we'll help them out with that. I think it's very important. I think it's very important to get the deal done.
You've been involved with the peacekeeping in Ukraine since your first day in the administration. What would you say to the Ukrainian people right now who are suffering under the Russian attacks and hoping that the American people will stand with them?
Well, I know Ukrainian people. I've known many over the years. They're great people. They're smart. They're energetic. They love their country. I mean, they love their country, and we want to get this war ended. That's all I can do. I love the Ukrainian people, but I love all people. I love the Russian people. I love them all. I want to get the war stopped. Very important.
Mr. President, was there any aspect of your discussion with Vladimir Putin that left you disappointed?
Look, we just spoke to, I was just telling the president, I just spoke to President Putin indirectly, and we're going to have a phone call right after these meetings today. And we may or may not have a trilat. If we don't have a trilat, then the fighting continues. And if we do, we have a good chance. I think if we have a trilat, there's a good chance of maybe ending it. But he's expecting my call when we're finished with this meeting. Thank you very much, everyone.
And there you have it, President Trump sitting side by side with Ukrainian President Zelenskyy in the Oval Office. The two leaders striking a cordial, collegial tone and also somewhat optimistic. Of course, a notable change in tone from the last time they met, that explosive blow-up that they had in the Oval Office back in February. Back then, President Trump berating the Ukrainian leader, accusing him of not being grateful enough for American support. Instead, today, the two leaders side by side trying to chart a path forward to finally end this war. President Trump saying he thinks there's a reasonable chance of ending the war. He repeatedly said he's focused on achieving lasting peace. That said, he was vague in many of his responses there on many of the critical aspects of these negotiations, including those security guarantees that Zelenskyy and other European leaders have been demanding. He appeared also not to want to tip the scales, while in the past, President Trump has made very clear who he thinks holds the cards here. When asked that, he didn't want to respond and give a clear answer. Although he did say heading into this meeting that he does think that what comes next is up to Volodymyr Zelenskyy, the Ukrainian leader, saying that he could end the war almost immediately. Let's bring in Rachel Scott at the White House, our senior political correspondent. And Rachel, of course, so much of these negotiations and the conversation around this ever since that meeting with Vladimir Putin has been about the issue of a ceasefire. The president went into that meeting on Friday making very clear that was his objective. He wanted to walk out of that summit with a ceasefire. That did not happen. Since then, though, we have seen President Trump backing off that previous push, instead embracing what had been Putin's demand that they instead work towards a full peace agreement based on a swap of territories. And again here today, you heard the president saying, quote, "I don't think you need a ceasefire," Rachel.
Yes, Marion, it is an extreme change in tone from the president. I was on Air Force One traveling to Alaska with the president. He came back. He spoke to reporters on our way to Anchorage, and he said that he wants to see a ceasefire rapidly. That was his message heading into that critical and pivotal meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Now coming out of that meeting with no ceasefire agreement in hand, no agreement reached, no date for a trilateral meeting set up, the president now having this change in tone in which he's saying that he believes the focus should be on a lasting peace and a longer-term peace deal. Also, Mary, this issue of whether or not there will be consequences for President Putin. We heard the president repeatedly warn in the lead up to that meeting and that summit that Putin would face consequences if there was no agreement reached. The president now seems to also be backing away from that as they continue these negotiations. Notable that the president also said after this meeting today, after the president does meet with Zelenskyy and also with these European leaders that are going to be here at the White House, he's going to be calling the Russian leader once again to figure out if the three of them could get in a room sometime this week or in the future. Mary?
And Rachel, that is really remarkable because, of course, as you noted, the president had been promising those harsh economic consequences. As you note, that didn't happen. No ceasefire, no harsh consequences for Russia. And the president still sounding optimistic there, though, that they can still sometime soon have that much sought after trilateral meeting, getting Vladimir Putin and President Zelensky and President Trump all to sit down.
Yeah, it's clear the president didn't get what he initially wanted heading into that meeting. We asked him what his expectations were, what would success look like. He said a ceasefire happening very soon. This still has not happened, but the president in his conversations is clearly seeing something that gives him a reason to believe that there may be some sort of agreement that ultimately can be worked out. And it's clear that the president is actually warming up to Zelensky's demand that he needs to see some sort of security guarantees, not only from the United States, but also our allies. The president very warm to that idea, and it's something that he clearly also communicated with Russian President Vladimir Putin. But you also heard there from Ukrainian President Zelensky when he was asked, what more do you need? He said, we need everything. Mary?
We need everything. Rachel, thank you. Let's get to our chief foreign correspondent, Ian Pannell, who is there in Kyiv. And Ian, as we said, the president there very vague on many of the specifics of these negotiations, including those critical security guarantees.
Yes, and why is that important, Mary? Let's remind everyone about that terrible attack that took place in the northern city of Kharkiv, Ukraine's second largest city. 5 drones hitting one building, killing 7 people, injuring over 20, and amongst the dead was a 1.5-year-old little girl called Mia. That was brought up in that conversation there. And that's why Zelensky says he wants the security protections and the weapons.
Russia continuing to attack Ukraine in the middle of all of this, of course. Ian, thank you. Let's bring in quickly our chief global affairs correspondent, Martha Raddatz. And Martha, you have interviewed Zelensky. You spoke with him, of course, after that previous blow-up in the Oval Office. It is notable the stark change in tone here today.
Stark change in tone, stark change in the way he dressed. If you'll remember, that episode started in the White House in February with someone saying he was dressed too casually and he could have had a suit on. It was a devastating meeting for Zelensky. And I asked him about that meeting in June, and he said, the camera doesn't lie. I can be emotional. He said, for people in America, they have to remember we've had 90,000 people dead. 631 of them were Ukrainian children. You can certainly add on that today. And over the last couple of months, there are many more than that. I also asked him after that Vatican meeting whether things had changed with his relationship with President Trump. He said, I can't 100% guarantee that. I hope we can have more time together. He certainly got that today. But the pressure is clearly on Zelensky, and we can't say enough that it was Russia that invaded Ukraine. Mary?
Certainly can't say that enough. And of course, no one is watching this more closely than the people of Ukraine. Martha, thank you. Let's get to former State Department official and ABC News contributor, Colonel Steve Ganyard. And Colonel, I know you're there at the big board with the map. Can you talk us through what exactly is on the table in these negotiations?
Yeah, Mary, we know what's not on the table. That is Crimea, Donetsk, and Luhansk. Putin has completely taken those off the table. His demand is for Zelensky to give up this remaining part of the Donbass. Zelensky has said no way will they give it up. So if we get to negotiations, we're starting out at an impasse.
All right, Colonel Ganyard, thank you so much. Our coverage continues on ABC News Live and abcnews.com. I'll be back with the entire team for World News Tonight. I'm Mary Bruce in New York. See you then.
This has been a special report from ABC News.
You are watching our continuing coverage of this historic meeting between President Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky there at the White House just months after that February explosive scene in the Oval Office. The president and Zelensky there shaking hands. Zelensky actually making a few laughs in the Oval Office before shaking hands with the president there. And for more, I want to bring in our White House correspondent, Karen Travers, who's there on the North Lawn for us. And Karen, it's pretty notable that this was a decidedly different approach by Zelensky going in. He referenced First Lady Melania Trump's letter about ending this war. He came with a letter of his own. He was dressed in a suit. He charmed the reporters there in the Oval Office. This was different.
It was different. And, I think one of the key messages from that explosive Oval Office meeting in February from the vice president and then eventually the president joined in was that they felt that President Zelenskyy wasn't thanking the United States and the administration for what they had been doing for Ukraine. And that was a different message than today from Zelenskyy, where he offered that up before he arrived here and at the White House, making it very clear that they're grateful that the work that the United States and the American people have done for the Ukrainian people and what they're going through right now. Sort of a different tone to start with, saying, we're not going to let this go off the rails like that meeting did in February. But the president was also very different than what he was like back in February. Alex, he spoke repeatedly about his desire to see a peace deal, to get this war to a conclusion. He said at one point that his administration has done more to get to the end of the war in the last 2 months than the previous administration did, but he notably didn't give any specifics as to why he feels confident that they're any closer now than they were 2 months ago, especially when you heard his Secretary of State saying yesterday that they're not on the precipice right now of a peace agreement. But Alex, he didn't speak in specifics about what exactly they're going to be doing right now to get that across the finish line and what the United States would be contributing at this point to the security guarantees that President Zelenskyy was very clear, very adamant that are necessary for his country, for him to enable him to agree to any agreement with Russia and any concessions that he would consider making.
Well, and to that point, I want to swing this to our senior political correspondent, Rachel Scott, who's also there at the White House. And Rachel, one of the things that Zelenskyy was pretty savvy in setting was an expectation for this trilateral meeting. We'd heard that, Trump had said this was going to happen. This is something that there have been conflicting messages from the Russian side, but Zelenskyy really kind of setting the table and this expectation that it's going to happen. But, one of the big question marks with this particular meeting and as these European leaders come in is, what do security guarantees look like for Ukraine at this point?
Yeah, and that is something that Zelenskyy has been very adamant about. He has made that very clear that if there is any sort of peace deal, long-lasting peace agreement, he believes there needs to be security guarantees from our allies, also from the United States as well. I will tell you, as I was making my way to Alaska on Air Force One with the president, reporters, we were asking about this and the possibility of security guarantees. At that point, the president said it would be something that he would consider. He was just coming off of that virtual phone call and conversation with European leaders and Zelenskyy, where they pushed for those security guarantees. And then the president now being very warm to this idea. I think it's very notable that this is something that he is saying is very likely, that there needs to be some security guarantees that are provided. It is clearly something that has been communicated with Russia as well. And I think from the White House perspective and talking to some senior officials, they think it's also a positive sign that Putin is still continuing these negotiations and these conversations as they're being upfront and honest about these security guarantees as well. But the length, the extent, how far does the United States go? How far do our allies go? That remains the big question mark in all of this, and whether that's enough for Zelenskyy. And you heard him there. He was asked specifically, what exactly do you need? Do you need weapons? Do you need intelligence? What do you need to actually feel secure? His answer was everything, Alex.
Yeah, that was certainly notable. And even coming into this meeting, we heard from France President Emmanuel Macron saying that if we were weak today with Russia, we prepare for the wars of tomorrow. It'll be interesting to see how that develops as this meeting is ongoing. I want to bring in our chief foreign correspondent, Ian Pannell, who has also been watching this play out. And Ian, one of the things that we heard from President Trump this afternoon, he said that he would be having a phone call with Putin after today's meeting to really kind of set the table for what he hopes will turn into a trilat. But we also know that this is playing out as Russia continues to attack Ukraine. Zelenskyy tweeting, even this morning, that 2 separate attacks had killed at least 10 Ukrainians.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, two terrible attacks, one in particular in Kharkiv, the country's second largest city. It's only about 30 miles or so from the border of Russia, and it's borne the brunt of Russia's continuous nightly assaults using drones, using rockets, using missiles. Early this morning, 5 drones hit this one residential complex, devastating the top floors. This entire family was killed, including a 1.5-year-old little girl called Mia. We've seen a photo. I mean, it's utterly tragic. And for Ukrainians, that's why they don't believe Vladimir Putin's promises. And it's also why just accepting the word of America, the Europeans, or Russia that they won't, that they'll have some kind of security protection isn't enough. They need to see the meat in the sandwich. What are those security guarantees that President Trump alluded to there? Rachel's right. That is an idea that President Trump seems to be warming to. It's something that President Zelenskyy has been asking for a long time. Why does he say he needs all the weapons? Why does he say that he needs security protection? Because his citizens, his children, are dying every single day. And so this is a very real problem. Ukrainian lives are on the line every single night. And so, yes, of course, they want a resolution to this. I think it's very interesting that President Trump said he was going to speak to Vladimir Putin after this. We know he wants a trilateral meeting between the three of them. Let's see what comes out of these conversations now. There's a lot of substance to get to, not least what happens with the territory, the concessions, potential concessions, and what is the detail of those security guarantees. Ukraine needs to hear the latter first. What are the security guarantees before it can even begin to entertain the idea of concessions? But remember, the Ukrainian constitution enshrines the inviolability of Ukrainian territory, Ukraine's territorial integrity. President Zelenskyy can't just say, okay, fine, we'll hand it over. And nor would anyone in the country support that idea. But there'll have to be some kind of compromise in order for it to move forward.
Ian, very good point. And I want to go back to Ambassador Bill Taylor, who's been listening along with this. And Ambassador, we're talking about the influence of first ladies here. We had this letter that President Trump shared on social media over the weekend, a peace letter that was penned by First Lady Melania Trump, where she writes that it's time to protect children and future generations worldwide. Ultimately, really kind of speaking to Russian President Vladimir Putin, suggesting that protecting children will do more to serve Russia alone, and also that it will serve humanity as well. Zelenskyy beginning the meeting today with a letter that his wife wrote in response. I mean, what do you make of this this type of diplomacy?
Well, clearly, both presidents listened carefully to their wives, and both presidents give a lot of credence to what their wives think about this war. And it's been very clear that that the First Lady, our First Lady, as well as most people in the United States, obviously in Ukraine, feel like this must be resolved. And she particularly focuses on the children, but that's a symbol of the Russians. The Russians have been as she points this out, the Russians have been kidnapping Ukrainian children and taking them back into Russia, giving them Russian names, making them speak Russian, giving them Russian passports, put them in Russian families, eliminating their ties to Ukraine. And so the First Lady recognizes the human aspect of this, as does Mrs. Zelenskyy as well. It's really important. And apparently this got through to President Trump. President Trump had been willing to give President Putin the benefit of the doubt until he saw the horror, the killing of Ukrainian civilians, which both First Ladies have pointed out.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Ambassador. I want to swing this to our Washington bureau chief, Rick Klein. And Rick, I mean, we were watching this play out, and you were scribbling notes. But one of the things that it's impossible to not reflect on is just how different this meeting was in tone than that one back in February. You saw Zelenskyy really kind of open with a softening there, certainly referring to the First Lady's note, also giving a note of his own from his wife. He got a couple of laughs with remarks about his suit and cracked a joke at another reporter. But also, I mean, this seems to be a part of a strategy of his to not just appear different to the president and set a different tone, but also set some expectations here going forward as this meeting continues on with European leaders.
I do think that Vladimir Zelenskyy took a course in Trump 101 that I think played out today, and it wasn't as evident several months ago where you saw the frustration. He had to sit there for a long time. He wants this meetings to happen. He just flew a long flight. This is a high-stakes moment, and Trump is taking all kinds of questions. He had to sit there, give a poker face, and draw some laughs. But he also knows that he has a slightly different equation. Trump has publicly called out Putin over the last couple of months. There wasn't that in evidence back in February. Trump seemed more likely to take a more combative tone in that initial meeting, and that's indeed what happened. And I think here the expectations are set to another level. Given what both presidents have just said, it's almost unfathomable now that there won't be that trilateral meeting, the meeting with Putin and Zelenskyy and Trump, unless Putin says no. So to put that pressure back on him going into the conversation, I think that is a win for Zelenskyy. And look, Trump is going to say what works in the moment. He obviously has a lot of options on the table as he has the private conversations that are going to really carry the news here. But he has set it up so that the next step almost has to be that, or everything collapses and we're back kind of at square one, which we know is more indiscriminate killing.
I'm curious, what did you make of Zelenskyy's response whenever he was asked what support from the U.S. looked like, and he said everything?
Everything, yeah, very telling. It's true. They depend on financial and military support as well as moral support and world community support. But it's also telling that when Trump was asked about potential security guarantees, he put that back on Europe. He was saying, look, my allies who are waiting in the other room,
they're the first line.
They're going to be the ones that are part of this. Obviously, Ukraine is in their backyard. It's more immediately necessary for them, but it's not enough. And I think you heard that directly from Zelenskyy, that he needs the American support. And it's part of, I think, the strategy that he went in today of trying to flatter the president and flatter the American people. Say, look, we recognize what you've done, the cost that this has meant. It's important for you. It's important for us. And yes, the fact that everything in his mind rides on the American support.
I appreciate that, Rick. I want to bring in presidential historian Mark Updegrove for more on this. And look, Mark, the president has really kind of couched himself as this peacemaker. It's been a core part of his second term here. He's inserted himself in this particular conflict and has, frankly, campaigned publicly for a Nobel Peace Prize. But I'm curious, I mean, what will it mean if he's not able to deliver on this conflict?
Well, the ramifications are huge if this conflict doesn't get resolved. I mean, the one thing that I'm looking for is what kind of concession is being made and what does it say? There is a concession. If we allow Putin to annex land in Ukraine that he has taken through aggression, what does that say to the other European nations surrounding Ukraine? If Putin continues to have expansionist ambitions, what does it say to the Chinese leader, Xi Jinping, about his ambitions to take Taiwan? So there is so much riding on these negotiations. But Alex, if the president can make a difference as a peacemaker, then that speaks volumes about the United States and its position in the world. And frankly, if he can broker an agreement, then maybe he should be considered for a Nobel Peace Prize, despite the tremendous inconsistency we have seen from him on the issue of Russia and Ukraine.
I'm curious, Mark, does timeline on a deal matter here?
Well, I think the sooner the better. You've seen this as a humanitarian crisis. We saw President Zelenskyy talk about the damage that has been done in Ukraine. Putin could talk about, if he were willing, he could talk about the tremendous damage among troops in Russia. There have been so many Russian troops that have died in this conflict. So there's a great humanitarian question that is in the balance here. I think that is vitally important. But you have to think, Alex, if you are Zelenskyy, the whiplash you must feel when you go to Washington. 2022, he was being heralded as a 21st century Churchill during the Biden administration. Biden called him a model of leadership for the whole world to see. And then there was that last meeting with Trump in February where it was almost 180 degrees. And here again today, we see another 180-degree pivot from Trump based on what we saw just a few months ago.
I want to bring in Lieutenant Colonel Doug Lute for more on some of these security asks, these protection asks that we've seen floated out. And one of the things that kind of strikes me is we've heard from European leaders float out that protections for Ukraine should be similar to that of NATO's Article 5. Can you lay out what that would look like, sir?
Sure. So in the NATO treaty, the 5th article, Article 5 is the collective defense treaty. It essentially says, in short, 3 or 4 sentences, that an attack on one ally, one NATO ally, shall be considered by all the other allies as an attack on them. So it's sort of the all for one, one for all clause in the NATO treaty. And that's an international, legally binding commitment. It's backed up by forces forward deployed. America has tens of thousands of troops in Europe backing up that pledge. It's backed up by a standing command and control structure led by an American 4-star. It's backed up by decades of training and exercises that actually make this commitment real. And ultimately, it's backed up by a pledge that the American nuclear deterrent is part of, could be part of, a NATO response. So there's a well-established meaning to Article 5, and it remains the global gold standard for security guarantees. As we toss around the phrase security guarantees in today's context with regard to Ukraine and so forth, we're clearly not talking about a NATO guarantee, but something like that. And it's the details of who, when, with what mission, in command of whom, with what rules of engagement. Those details, as we talk about Ukraine, are really what matter.
He wanted a ceasefire, and he said that it was going to happen pretty rapidly, and also promised severe consequences if there wasn't one. And after hearing readouts from Secretary of State Rubio and also Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, it seems as though, at least from Rubio, that he's saying that we're still a long way off and we're not at the precipice of a peace agreement. I'm curious. Do you think a peace agreement can happen without a ceasefire, or is there some nuance there to those two terms?
Well, look, as the two parties were flying towards Alaska last Friday, President Trump was flying with an agreement for a ceasefire among his administration, the Ukrainians, and the Europeans. And that 3-part agreement was flipped in a matter of a couple hours after meeting with Putin. And that's a dramatic shift. And today's conversation will contend with this transition from peacefire first to peacefire eventually.
Gotcha. I appreciate that. I want to bring in foreign correspondent Tom Sophie Burge to talk about Zelensky's prep ahead of today. You know that he met in London late last week, and then also in Brussels over the weekend with European leaders. It's clear that he had been prepped ahead of today's meeting, even donning that black suit, which was. Drew some comments in the Oval Office today. But going back to this weekend, that meeting in Brussels, do we know what was talked about there?
We know that European leaders are focused on these security guarantees. And I think from their perspective, Alex, I mean, there are very clear signs from President Trump. I think I might be wrong about this. We can go back and check it. But I think this is, the clearest sign from President Trump that the US will be, in some way, in his words, part of future security guarantees in the event of a deal. As colleagues have been pointing out, we're short on the detail. Is the US military going to be involved in logistics, intel? Previously, President Trump has poured cold water on the idea of US troops on the ground as part of this so-called reassurance force, which could be on the ground in Ukraine, not right near the front lines, but further back. That is what the French President Emmanuel Macron, other leaders, the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer are kind of pushing for. And we now have a clear indication from Donald Trump that the US will be involved in that. To what extent is the big question. I think the other thing, Alex, that was kind of missing in this spray with reporters today, and if I had been in the room, I probably would have put a question on, is the issue of territory, right? We didn't have much of a question, I think, on this notion which President Putin of Russia has put on the table to the US, the idea that Russia would take over the remainder of Ukraine's eastern Donetsk region, a sizable portion of land which Ukrainian troops hold, which they've held basically for more than 10 years, because Russia started a war in eastern Ukraine via proxies back in 2014. And I think that is at the crux of everything. For the Ukrainians, the idea of giving up that territory which they currently control is completely a non-starter. But if they were to do it, it's a massive, massive if, there would have to be such a big payback in terms of the security guarantees. And therefore, you come back to that central question. To what extent? President Trump has said the US will be involved now in some kind of security guarantees for Ukraine to stop Russia reinvading the future. But to what extent? And that is obviously the other central question here. I mean, look, yes, comparatively, you mentioned it went way better for Zelenskyy this time around. He was in his suit. I think when there were thorny questions, he played a very, very easy hand, a very conservative hand. He avoided basically saying anything that could antagonize President Trump. But I think, that's relative to last time around because it was so disastrous last time around. I think from a Ukrainian perspective, there were still a lot of uncomfortable moments. Whenever Donald Trump was pressed on whether he, kind of got the Ukrainian perspective on this, he continues, and US officials continue to tread this line. They want to stay down the middle because they don't want to say anything that could be deemed by the Russians as a negative and therefore, ruin the chances of this negotiation and potentially getting a deal. And on that critical question of whether there should be a ceasefire first, while the negotiations go out, President Trump defended why he's gone around to the Russian position on that, basically saying, look, I've solved other wars, he says, and in those cases, we didn't need a ceasefire. We just got straight to a settlement. Ukraine is way more complicated. It's a hot conflict right now. And from the Ukrainian perspective, there needs to be a ceasefire right now to stop the killing and to prevent Russia just dragging this out, playing for time, which we've seen the Russians successfully do up until now. The question is it different this time around? Is the US putting more leverage on the process, potentially via India, other big powers, economic leverage, to force Russia into a position where Russia is actually going to make some genuine concessions?
Well, and Tom, you brought the Donetsk region, which is a really important point. My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that is in terms of strategy, one of the stronger borders between Ukraine and Russia, and so certainly ceding that territory would probably, in many Ukrainians' eyes, put them at a disadvantage. But also, it's something that currently, Russia only has about 70% of, and so there are a lot of Ukrainians that would say, that would be giving up a huge chunk of something that they don't see that they necessarily have to cede.
Yeah, look, let me explain it, right? So Donetsk and Luhansk are two regions in eastern Ukraine. They're called collectively the Donbass. Luhansk is in the north, and Russia pretty much controls the whole of Luhansk. Donetsk, as you say, the Russians control about 70% of it. They controlled a large part of it since 2014, or much smaller part. What is happening in Donetsk right now, Alex, is that Russian troops are incrementally moving forward. It is a war of attrition, and it is really the most active front line in this war, because you've got to think of the front line between Russian and Ukrainian forces as a massive, massive 1,000-kilometer long front line. And, Donetsk, around a key city of Pokrovsk, that is where Russian troops are making gains. They are moving forward. And that is why this is such an intractable issue. From a Ukrainian perspective, giving up land, like the whole of that remaining 30%, that would include two other key cities, Kramatorsk and Sloviansk. I've been to them on many, many occasions. I've stayed in them. They are close to the front lines. They're garrison towns, but they are real bastions for the Ukrainians. They're not close to falling. And, the idea that Ukraine would give up even more of its sovereign territory, because, a lot of the commentary at the moment, we're talking about land swaps. in a potential deal. In a way, that's the wrong term because it implies that we're talking about maybe Russian land for Ukrainian land. We're not talking about that at all. We're talking about potentially Ukraine being pressured or, agreeing to give up even more of its own sovereign territory than Russia has already taken illegally in the invasion. And then from a Russian perspective, it is a hard sell for Putin if you look at it from the Kremlin's point of view, because their troops are moving forward, albeit very, very slowly, at a great cost, both to the Russian military and to the Ukrainian military. And President Trump, how many times has he talked about hundreds, if not thousands, of troops on both sides dying in a single week? I mean, this is how difficult it is to solve the territory question. And, according to officials, in this kind of proposal that Putin has put on the table to Trump and his team, the Russians might be willing to give up very, very small areas of territory right up in the north in a region called Sumy, and potentially a tiny bit of territory in Kharkiv, which is in the northeast. I mean, these are not, much of a payback for Ukraine. And it goes to the crux of what this is about. Ukrainians are fighting for their land. So much of their own blood has been spilled. Every Ukrainian I know knows someone who serves in the army, who's been killed in the army. You go onto the streets of Kiev and the amount of men you see with prosthetic limbs. People have sacrificed so much up until now in Ukraine in the last 3 years, and really going back to 2014 when Russia really started this with a proxy force in eastern Ukraine, that for the president of Ukraine to basically give up more land, that is impossible and will only happen if the payback is so huge in terms of security guarantees. And that really comes down to Donald Trump and his administration and what the US is willing to give into that process.
Okay, Tom, thanks for that breakdown. I want to bring in our D.C. managing editor here, Catherine Faulders. And Catherine, one of the things that struck me, during that meeting in the Oval Office, we heard President Trump not commit to ruling out U.S. troops, but he said send the EU in because they're the first line of defense there. But I'm curious, are we getting any rumblings as to what a U.S. commitment would look like here?
I don't think that we are. I heard that Trump said that he doesn't want to commit, that he doesn't want to rule these things out. I think, as some were mentioning before, that is just a way of him to obviously not rule any of these ideas out while he goes into this closed-door meeting with Zelenskyy, and where he says all options are on the table here. Of course, that's something that he hasn't expanded on, and what potentially that would look like. I think what's interesting here, just generally speaking about the entire posture, is that he almost admitted, and as our Martha Raddatz has pointed out, that he almost admitted that the ceasefire is off the table. Before, that was the only thing really on the table, that he wanted a ceasefire. He wanted a commitment to a ceasefire, and that's not what he's getting here. How is that going to go over behind the scenes? Obviously, with Zelenskyy, we know that the president says that he's expected to talk to President Putin following these meetings today with European leaders and with Zelenskyy. And frankly, it seems as though that Trump is trying to put the ball in Putin's court as to whether they have a trilateral meeting after the fact. So again, there are lots of questions here, including what, if anything, U.S. troop involvement would potentially look like, as Trump says he's not ruling that out. But questions we don't yet have the answers to that will probably be discussed behind closed doors in the couple of meetings that they have going on right now.
All right, we'll wait and see. Catherine Faulders, thank you so much. And I want to go back to our presidential historian, Mark Updegrove, for one more. And Mark, listen, we are just 210 days into this new administration, and while there have been a number of moments that you could look and say, oh, this feels like it's going to be definitive for this administration, today certainly feels like it meets that criteria, probably this and also Alaska. But I'm curious, can you put this into context of just how pivotal of a moment that meeting that we just saw in the Oval Office was?
Well, I think very pivotal because, as we've heard earlier, Alex, that there's a major change in tone from Donald Trump and the White House. You can see it today. Stylistically, there's Zelenskyy wearing a suit. You could see the outward affection almost that Donald Trump showed towards Zelenskyy, very different from the aggressive posture that he took the last time Zelenskyy was in his office back in February. He had all those, his aides around him. He had J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio then. He did as well today. but again, a very, very different tone. But and so that's a good thing, and it's a good thing that you have Donald Trump talking to both Putin and Zelensky, as well as European leaders. That's how agreements get made, by having these open dialogues. Whether we get a trilateral agreement, we'll have to see. But so much remains to be seen here, Alex. But at least this is a good sign that there is the United States is backing up Ukraine, and we are willing to talk to Putin about a possible settlement in a trilateral meeting. We'll see. Again, much remains to be seen, but this is at least good progress.
All right, Mark Updegrove, we will leave it there for now. We're going to take a quick break. More continuing coverage of this historic meeting between President Trump and President Zelensky and European leaders after the break.
I'd never seen that many skeletal remains. Thousands. It's a serial killer case.
This killer, he's the dumber you've never heard of.
More and more men are going missing, and then the lead broke the case open. They discovered the farm.
The whole place was so bizarre.
There were mannequins, almost like it was a club.
I felt the presence of evil.
The largest number of unidentified human remains, second only to the World Trade Center.
Not many people live to tell about their involvement with the serial killer.
Everything we know about this case comes from you.
Absolutely.
Let's not do that. Ooh, I'm sorry.
Never before a face-to-face interview with a camera.
Why now?
Let me ask you, am I the evil culprit, the accomplice? I'd like to know how the audience views me.
The Fox Hollow Murders, Playground of a Serial Killer. Only on Hulu.
Abby and Libby had gone on a walk, but we went to pick them up. They weren't there.
When the bodies were found, it felt different than any crime scene that I have ever seen.
She captured the image of her own murderer.
That Libby was able to get the video was very amazing.
There were dozens of viable suspects. Here's the rest of the story. Here's what they didn't tell you.
The person that did this is pure evil.
Capturing their killer. The Girls on the High Bridge. Only on Hulu.
The peaceful silence in Kafue National Park was pierced by a gunshot.
There's been a horrible tragic accident.
His wife was shot dead.
There were a number of factors that indicated that this was not an accident. They thought they had gotten away with it for years.
This call is from a federal prison. I relive this every day in my mind.
I still can't believe it turned out the way it did.
Trophy Wife, Murder on Safari, only on Hulu.
Welcome back, and thanks for streaming with us. Some of the other top headlines that we're following this hour. The Lone Star State's legislative standoff is coming to an end.
The House will come to order. Members, strict enforcement has been requested by Mr. Moody. That means you should only vote for yourself and from your desk and not for anybody else. Clerk, ring the bell.
The Texas House of Representatives able to gavel in for business after enough Democrats returned to the Capitol. They had fled the state, hoping to stop a redistricting bill that could flip as many as 5 congressional seats to GOP control. State Democrats say they now plan to fight the effort in court. And the Spanish Army deploying more than 3,000 troops to help firefighters battle the wildfires in that country. More than a dozen fires are currently burning along the country's border with Portugal, threatening homes and shutting down a popular Christian pilgrimage route. Officials are now ordering lockdowns and evacuations as they struggle to get a handle on the fires, made worse by the ongoing heat wave. And Canada's Industrial Relations Board has declared the strike by more than 10,000 flight attendants illegal. They're ordering them back on the job a day after trying and failing to compel their union into arbitration with the airline. But it's not clear how the union, fighting for better pay and benefits, will respond. The strike is impacting more than 13,000 travelers each day. The news never stops, neither do we. You can find us anywhere that you stream live news. And if you're on the go, we're on the ABC News app and abcnews.com. I'm Alex Crochet. Thank you for streaming with us. There's more news up next.
You never take evidence home, Morgan.
What? He's wearing gloves. You hired me because I noticed things that you missed.
We're not partners.
Non-romantic partner.
She's actually just a consultant.
Bingo.
Let's solve this case.
LAPD! The fun has just begun.
It's not terrifying at all.
Feels good, doesn't it? Being more than human. But there's a price. Do you know what it is?
Okay, we want to know, who are the people in your state that make such a big difference?
Come on now. We all know someone who does so much.
And we want to celebrate them with you. So scan this QR code or go to goodmorningamerica.com. Tell us about them.
We're coming to all 50 states in 50 weeks to celebrate the best of what makes America beautiful.
I'm Matt Gutman above devastated Altadena, California. Wherever the story is, we'll take you there. You're watching ABC News Live.
Friday night, David Muir reporting.
We take you inside two cases. A mother just 19 years old.
She was trying to protect her daughter. She fought like hell.
Another case into a beloved teacher, her whole future ahead of her.
Mysterious cold cases.
It gives you chills even today.
Yes.
What links both of those cases is the cutting-edge forensic technology inside this lab.
It sounded like science fiction at the time.
Can they be solved?
You'll see it unfold right here as they unmask the killer in both cases.
Catching the Killers, 2020, Friday on ABC. You're watching America's #1 streaming news, ABC News Live. Breaking news, exclusives, live reporting across the globe. Keep streaming with ABC News Live.
You never take evidence home, Morgan.
What? He's wearing gloves. You hired me because I noticed things that you missed.
We're not partners.
Non-romantic partner.
She's actually just a consultant.
Bingo.
Let's solve this case.
LAPD! The fun has just begun.
It's not terrifying at all.
A critical day for the future of Europe. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Alex Perche in Washington, and that is our top story this hour. President Trump hosting Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy at the White House 6 months after that disastrous Oval Office meeting that ended in a screaming match. And at any moment right now, the leaders are going to be joined by European allies like French President Macron and UK's Prime Minister Keir Starmer. They'll be appearing alongside each other for a family photo. And it comes after Trump started off today's visit by vowing to end the war in Ukraine and saying that Russia's President Vladimir Putin is on the same page. Take a listen.
The war is going to end. When it ends, I can't tell you, but the war is going to end, and this gentleman wants it to end, and Vladimir Putin wants it to end. I think the whole world is tired of it, and we're going to get it ended.
Today's meeting marks a major difference that from the one in February. Zelenskyy will be joined by the top leaders in Europe, including UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer and French President Emmanuel Macron. But perhaps more importantly, this meeting comes just days after Trump's historic summit with Putin on U.S. soil, a summit that saw no ceasefire, no tangible results, and if anything, saw the president take the same view or a similar view as the Russian leader. So for more on all of this, I want to bring in foreign correspondent Tom Sophie-Burge, Washington, D.C. Bureau Managing Editor Catherine Faulders, and contributor and former senior CIA field operative Daryl Blocker. And Catherine, I want to start with you here. There's been a major tone change whenever it comes to today's meeting. Even Zelenskyy is showing up in a suit this time. Certainly, he referenced First Lady Melania Trump's letter. But what do you make of this shift?
Well, I think Zelenskyy, when he was last in the Oval Office, has maybe been coached on some of the ways to at least sit down, if you will, with President Trump. You saw that disastrous meeting last time, and that went completely downhill. He was almost shouted out of the Oval Office. This was a much different tone, as you saw there in the Oval Office. And I think what you mentioned about that letter specifically, that Melania Trump letter, is something that Trump appreciates being brought up and frankly noticed by the Ukrainian leader. So it was very interesting to see how much that changed, especially as you remember with the Vice President J.D. Vance sitting there. He was pretty much quiet this time versus last time when they got into that screaming match. So I think Zelenskyy knows what buttons he shouldn't push, if you will, when sitting down with Trump. And we do know also that any leader, frankly, any European leader that is meeting with Trump is coached extensively before walking into the White House or the Oval Office. So, of course, the question is what exactly happens behind closed doors. As you see, you're looking at the cross hall of the White House right now. You'll see that photo op with Trump, Zelenskyy, I believe, and other European leaders who are over there for meetings. That will happen there again shortly. But during that Oval Office spray, it was light on specifics from both Trump and Zelenskyy. Of course, they hadn't really met behind closed doors yet. They seemed optimistic about negotiations for a peace deal. We know Trump is still eyeing that trilateral meeting, he says. Trump says he will phone Putin following this meeting between Zelenskyy and himself, basically putting the ball back in Putin's court to see if a meeting between the three of them does in fact occur.
Yeah, well, and to that point, the president saying that he was going to be phoning Putin after this meeting. Tom, I want to swing this to you. It was clear that Zelenskyy had a good bit of coaching, or at least strategy sessions with other European allies before his visit to the Oval Office. We know that he met in Brussels with a number of these leaders. He was in London earlier last week. But also, whenever it comes to support, it seems that Zelenskyy and at least whenever it comes to French President Macron are aligned here. We heard some pretty strong words from Macron just yesterday, saying that if we were weak today with Russia, we prepare the wars of tomorrow.
Yeah, I think Zelenskyy has a pretty impressive kind of show of support from European leaders in Washington with him, and we'll see that family photo shortly, hopefully. And look, there's some interesting characters in there. You've got Giorgia Meloni, far-right Prime Minister of Italy. President Trump and Meloni get on well. You've got the Finnish President Alexander Stubb. He has a warm relationship with Donald Trump. You've got Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, again, seems to have quite a good rapport with Trump. You've got French President Emmanuel Macron, 8 years as a world leader on the international stage, a bit of a heavyweight in terms of his experience at this type of thing. So, definitely Europe is putting on this united front. I mean, in terms of the substance today, I think the most important thing we've heard from Donald Trump so far today is that he has, I think, for the clearest time yet, indicated that the US will be part of, these so-called security guarantees. That will be potentially, there's two elements to that, according to European leaders and Ukrainian President Zelenskyy. First, building up Ukraine's army so that in the long term, it is the first line of defense for Russia if Russia was going to re-attack Ukraine in the event of a deal. And then the second idea is this so-called reassurance force. Effectively, it will be European troops on the ground in Ukraine, not right on the front line, not, according to French President Emmanuel Macron, involved in a hot conflict, but there as a deterrent. Now, what we don't have, I think, from President Trump today is a sense of detail on that. How far is he willing to go? But President Macron was saying yesterday that that is the key question, or one of the key questions, which will be part of these discussions which are happening now. And I think the other key question, probably the more important question, is territory. And we didn't get much on that. Russia has put this idea on the table that it should take the remainder of its Ukraine's eastern Donetsk region. Russia controls about 70% of it so far. But there's a really significant part of Donetsk, which I know well. I've stayed in it. I've been to it throughout the years. And Ukrainian troops are holding that very firmly. I mean, Russian troops are creeping forward slowly there at some cost to their own military and to the Ukrainian military. But, for Ukraine to give up that land would be a very, very, very hard sell for the Ukrainian people and for the Ukrainian president, given the amount of sacrifice that Ukraine has made in the last 3 years, and really stretching back to 2014 when Russia launched its war in eastern Ukraine via proxy. So, how you can get the Russians to give up on that offensive, or to get Ukraine to really give up some of its territory it doesn't even given, well, it's still controlled. I mean, that is an intractable issue, and I think that is still the one why Secretary of State Marco Rubio, in some of his interviews yesterday and with ABC, was saying, you know, we might still be a long way from a deal.
Well, and you were talking about, you know, this cast of European characters. One of the things that is also stuck out is that while they are power players, you know, a lot of them also have, you know, favorable ties to the Trump administration. You talk about Giorgia Meloni, who actually, you know, broke off from vacation to come to this. You know, she stayed at Mar-a-Lago, and then also Alexander Stubb, the president of Finland, notably kind of ingratiated himself with Trump earlier this year. Playing golf with the president there in Florida, and so clearly, you know, this is a group that understands how to deal with the president, and certainly they've likely advised Zelenskyy ahead of this meeting. But Daryl, I want to swing this to you. This is coming off the heels of a historic summit where we saw Russian President Vladimir Putin set foot on U.S. soil, and so I'm curious, I mean, what do you make of our world leaders on full display like this?
Well, I think it was advantage to Putin and the Russians for sure. They got everything that they wanted out of it, and I'm not sure that we've gotten everything that we wanted out of it. I think it was important for all three leaders to be there, maybe not in Alaska, but for all three of them to sit down, and certainly not in Moscow. But there have been deals that have been hammered out that have held, the Good Friday deals, the Balkan Wars of the 90s, Camp David. You know, these were very, very short-term deals that were reached after years and years of negotiation behind the scene. So hopefully the administration is learning from each of its missteps, and at the end of the day, and by the end of the year, as many people are predicting, that some type of agreement can be reached and the killing can stop.
Well, and I know that our White House correspondent Karen Travers is with us now, and Karen, one of the questions that I wanted to ask you is, you know, what happened to this idea of a ceasefire? The president had said there would be consequences at one point if there wasn't a ceasefire, specifically consequences for Russia here. But why the change in tone?
Yeah, this is a very significant shift, not just in tone, Alex, but really in policy of the administration. And this all happened since his meeting with Vladimir Putin last Friday in Alaska. For weeks, the president had been saying that Vladimir Putin had to agree to a ceasefire. He put a timeline on it, saying that he had to do that within 8 to 10 days, or else Russia was going to face severe consequences. He was threatening sanctions. He was threatening tariffs, also sanctions on countries that do business with Russia, buying their energy and oil. And yet now the president is saying he doesn't need to see a ceasefire, that he wants to see this conflict go straight to a peace agreement. That is the Russian position on this. That is not what Ukraine has been pushing for. It's not what these European leaders who are here at the White House want to see either. They want to see the killing and fighting stop while the longer negotiations, which are very difficult, of course, play out. Because we heard the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, say yesterday to our Martha Raddatz that they're not on the precipice right now of a peace agreement. That could take a while. And so that means that the fighting would continue, no ceasefire until that further point. And who knows what that timeline would look like. But today, the president again saying he doesn't need a ceasefire. He didn't when he tried to solve other conflicts around the world since he took office. He did, though, acknowledge, Alex, that this one has become much more complicated. It's more challenging than he expected, but does feel that this is potentially possible if they could get him, Vladimir Putin, and Zelenskyy all in the room together, that a trilateral meeting of those leaders could push these conversations along.
Well, we'll see what happens after today. Karen Travers, Catherine Falders, Tom Sufi Burge, and Daryl Blocker, thank you all. And we want to continue to thank you for streaming with us. Parts of the Outer Banks are under a mandatory evacuation ahead of Hurricane Erin. While the now Category 4 storm is still well out off sea, the Atlantic coast, officials say that dangerous waves, rip currents, and flooding are possible. The storm is battering Puerto Rico with heavy rain and powerful winds over the weekend. Our Victor Oquendo is in North Carolina's Outer Banks with more.
Hurricane Erin is a real threat to this area. A state of emergency is in place, and several counties have ordered mandatory evacuations. Here in the Outer Banks, we are watching for life-threatening rip currents, major coastal flooding, and even tropical storm force winds. Hurricane Erin regaining strength overnight and intensifying into a Category 4 hurricane, packing winds of at least 130 miles per hour. Hurricane hunters capturing video as they flew their plane into the eye of the storm, the massive eye wall looming above. Erin bringing heavy rain and wind to parts of the Caribbean over the weekend. Its outer bands lashing the Virgin Islands and flooding parts of Puerto Rico, leaving thousands there without power. And new video showing the dramatic rescue of 2 divers caught in rough seas off the coast of St. Croix as Erin approached. Despite Erin's position offshore, it is bringing dangerous surf from South Carolina up to Maine. With recent drownings along the East Coast, lifeguards are already on alert. In just a matter of hours, Erin will start kicking up this surf behind us, and by midweek, these waves could be up to 12 feet. Local officials are urging everyone, residents and visitors, to make their final preparations. Alex?
Victor, thank you. And for more on where Hurricane Erin is headed next, I want to bring in our meteorologist, Kitten Jawecki, who's tracking the latest. Hey, Kitten.
Alex, yeah, Hurricane Erin is very strong. Category 4, 140 mile per hour winds. You can see it's bringing tropical storm warnings to Turks and Caicos, parts of the Bahamas as well. That's because they're going to see 40 mile per hour plus winds today and tomorrow. As it continues up to the north and then over to the northeast, staying off the coast of America and also off of Bermuda as well, just right in between. It's going to be Category 3 or a Category 2 Wednesday and Thursday as it moves up between those two areas, but it's still going to bring us some impacts. Not really from rain, though. When we look at the rain from this system, you can see on this future track, by about midnight on Thursday morning, we're not going to be seeing much rain from this as it stays away from the coast. That's because we have a cold front and a stationary boundary that's going to keep that away from us. That's why it's pushing back up to the northeast, and it's not going to make landfall here in America. But what about the wind from the outer edges of this hurricane? Well, you can see that 39 mile per hour yellow area. That's tropical storm strength winds of 39 miles per hour plus. That could reach the Outer Banks as we head into our Thursday and Thursday night. So it could have some stronger winds there, but it's really going to be the rip currents and especially the waves that we really need to watch out for. This is on Tuesday. You can see waves all along the coast in the green. That's up to 6 feet worth of waves there. Then once we head into your Wednesday, you can see we're 8 to 12 feet as you get to Myrtle Beach, also all of Florida as well under that too. But then we have Myrtle Beach up to Hatteras there. That's going to be for the Outer Banks. So already seeing that on Wednesday, but Thursday is our big day. And I really want to focus here on Thursday for the Outer Banks. That's going to be our big day where we're seeing the most impacts with large breaking waves of 15 to 20 plus feet. That's going to bring extreme damage and coastal erosion to this area. It is also going to break away even some sand dunes that are barriers along the beach. And we're also looking at severe flooding that's also going to extend inland, submerging any vehicles in the area potentially along the coast and closing roads, and also could affect some businesses in the area as well. So yes, of course, rip currents are going to be a big issue in this area, but it's those waves that are going to get you first. You don't want to be out in the water in this type of wave activity. Alex.
Kenton, thank you. And coming up after the break, a holdup for Make America Healthy Again. Why RFK Jr.'s cuts to pesticides might not go through. That's next.
What does it take to be the most watched newscast in America?
An operation to capture ISIS fighters.
Is this our Combat Operations Center?
We're approaching the gate now. Militants came in from 4 or 5 different directions. Operational nuclear reactor. So you have a couple loaded and ready to go. The house is destroyed, but the flag, there's not a tear in it.
Not a tear in it.
How important is this label right here, Made in the USA? Look at your smile. You're proud of this.
I love this.
Great work.
Hi.
Where are you? Where are you?
Appreciate you.
Thank you, David. Good to meet you. Ismail? David.
David.
Yes, yes. I'm David Muir.
I know who you are.
You
I watch
do?
you every night.
ABC's World News Tonight with David Muir is America's most watched newscast.
Many people think they know my story, but now it's my turn to tell it.
Oh my God.
there is a body. It's Meredith.
I swear to
Welcome back to ABC News Live. We're coming back now because President Trump, just momentarily, is slated to be joined by European leaders for what they call a family photo there at the White House. You're looking at live pictures as the group assembles here. We've got the NATO Secretary General. We've got the EU Chancellor, UK's Prime Minister Keir Starmer, the German Chancellor, also French President Emmanuel Macron, the President of Finland, and the Italian Prime Minister there, along with Ukrainian President Zelenskyy, all standing there, posing rather stoically there for what they call a family photo. I'm going to listen in for just a second.
Is everything okay? Are you all set? Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, we saw President Trump there directing traffic for a little bit. I want to bring in Daryl Blocker, who's been listening in. And Daryl, listen, when we talk about this cast of characters, this is a group that certainly the power players in Europe, but also folks that are very familiar with how to deal with President Trump. Most of them have pretty congenial relationships with Trump here, and so I'm curious, heading into this meeting, I mean, what are you watching for?
I believe the administration is trying to counterbalance the overwhelmingly positive pictures of Putin arriving in Alaska and the fallout that the administration is hearing about some of that. I think it is important that the NATO's there, that the European Commission is there, and that some of the biggest allies, longtime allies of the United States, like France, are also, and the UK, of course, that are there. So I think that is going to offset maybe some of the criticism that the administration has had about being very warm and chummy with a person who has been, on a list of people who are war criminals. So I think that was a stroke of genius. I think it's a good start. And of course, having people who know how to speak Donald Trump's language is always going to be a win-win, or typically.
Yeah. Well, and so much was made of that Alaska summit. The U.S. literally rolling out the red carpet. You had those images of Russian President Vladimir Putin inside the Beast limousine with President Trump there, appearing to smile. Listen, I mean, I'm looking at this picture that we just saw play out here from the White House. No smiles here. I mean, this appears to be a pretty serious moment between the president and these European allies. But we learned that this all came together really quickly. The president was on the phone with members of NATO as he left that summit in Alaska. And now just fast forward a couple of days and you have all these European leaders here in Washington. What does that tell you?
Alex, what that's telling me is that the United States now recognizes that it cannot do this alone, that one phone call is not going to end this, that one negotiation from a business sense is going to fix this. So having these leaders, these powerful leaders behind them, even the Italian president, who of course is more Trump in her proclivities than some of the others, it is truly, truly important for the administration to accept the fact that this is going to be a team effort and that we cannot do it alone, and that we have to rely on long-term and near-term partners to bring Vladimir Putin to the table in a way that's going to actually bring a ceasefire first and then peace.
Yeah, you were referencing Prime Minister Meloni, who's third from, well, actually, she was third from the right there, just went out of frame, actually broke off from vacation to make this trip to Washington. She is far right, but gets along well with President Trump, has spent time at Mar-a-Lago in the past. And Daryl, as we talk about, kind of setting the tone here, it is, you can't go without marking the difference between this meeting between Trump and Zelensky and what played out back in February. Actually, Daryl, let's take a pause. I hear President Trump is speaking right now. Let's listen in.
Hi, Mark. Yeah, good. Well, thank you very much. It's a great honor to have you here. Special place. White House is special no matter where you're from. Represents so much, and it really is beautiful. And thank you for all of the wonderful things that took place today. We've had a very successful day thus far. And important discussions as we work to end the killing and stop the war in Ukraine. We're all working for the same goal. Very simple goal. We want to stop the killing, get this settled. I've just had the honor of being with President Zelensky and all of the discussions that we've had. We covered a lot of territory. And I spoke indirectly with President Putin today. We're going to call President Putin right after this meeting. I'm sure we're going to have a solid meeting, good meeting, maybe a great meeting. And we're going to try and work out a trilat after that and see if we can get it finished. Put this to sleep, because this is not since the Second World War has there been anything like this. So I'm honored to welcome NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, who's a great gentleman, great political leader in Europe generally, but now he's the NATO Secretary General, and you're doing a fantastic job. Thank you very much, Mark. Prime Minister Starmer of the United Kingdom, our friend and my friend, and doing really well, and people like him a lot. We all like him. Everyone knows President Macron of France, who's been with me from the beginning, one of the first people I met as a foreign dignitary, and I liked him from day one. And I like him even more now. That's pretty good. That's unusual. That's a pretty unusual thing. Prime Minister Meloni of Italy, who's a really a great leader and an inspiration over there. She's served now, even though she's a very young person, she's served there for a long period of time relative to others. They don't last very long. You've lasted a long time. You're going to be there a long time. Chancellor Merz of Germany, who is a very strong person and a very strong leader and very highly respected in Germany. And he's my friend, and it's an honor to have him as my friend. Thank you very much. Very good. You look great with your tan. Where did you get that tan? I want to get a tan like that. That's true. President Stubb of Finland, and he's somebody that, where are we here? Where?
I'm right here.
Oh. You look better than I've ever seen you look. But you've done a great job, and we wanted to have you here because you're somebody that we all respect. And you've had a lot to do with the success, I think, and the potential success. And thank you very much for being here. We appreciate it. And the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, who is somebody that we just made a big deal with all of those countries. I don't know. I think you might be more powerful than all these guys at this table. I don't know. But we had a great negotiation, and you're respected all over the world. So I want to thank you very much for being here. It's a great honor to have you. The Alaska summit reinforced my belief that while difficult, peace is within reach, and I believe that in a very significant step, President Putin agreed that Russia would accept security guarantees for Ukraine, and this is one of the key points that we need to consider, and we're going to be considering that at the table also, like who will do what, essentially. I'm optimistic that collectively we can reach an agreement that would deter any future aggression against Ukraine, and I actually think there won't be. I think that's even overrated, largely overrated, but we're going to find out. And I think that the European nations are going to take a lot of the burden. We're going to help them, and we're going to make it very secure. We also need to discuss the possible exchanges of territory, taking into consideration the current line of contact. That means the war zone, the war lines that are pretty obvious, very sad, actually, to look at them. And negotiating positions. President Putin, also, you have President of Ukraine, who you just met a little while ago, and we're going to try and get a three-party meeting, maybe as soon as we can. And I have a feeling you and President Putin are going to work something out. Ultimately, this is a decision that can only be made by President Zelenskyy and by the people of Ukraine working also together in agreement with President Putin. And I just think that's very good things are going to come of it. So I hope we have a good meeting. And if we can have a good meeting, I'll set up a meeting with President Putin. And if you'd like, I'll go to that meeting. And not that I want to do that, but I will do that because we want to save a lot of people from dying. A lot of people are dying, and we got to save them. Got to save it. 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 people sometimes a week. All of us would obviously prefer an immediate ceasefire while we work on a lasting peace, and maybe something like that could happen. As of this moment, it's not happening, but President Zelenskyy and President Putin can talk a little bit more about that. You know, in the 6 or so wars that we stopped, we haven't had a ceasefire. And so I don't know that it's necessary. You can do it through the war, but it would be, I like the ceasefire from another standpoint. You immediately stop the killing. But I believe a peace agreement at the end of all of this is something that's very attainable, and it can be done in the near future. With all of the wars that I got involved in, we only have this one left. Of course, as I walk out the door, there'll probably be a new one starting, and I'll get that stopped too. But I thought this was going to be one of the easier ones. It's actually one of the most difficult. They're very complex. The next step would be for a trilateral meeting, and that will be worked out. And I just look forward to working and having a great result. We're going to spend a lot of time today talking about, and we're really honored you guys came over. I mean, these are the heads of major countries and respected all over Europe. And they speak for, largely, I think I should say, but pretty much for the other countries of Europe. And we will come to a resolution today, I think, on almost everything, including probably the security. And that's pretty much the story. I'd like to say, Mr. President, would you like to say something? You have the media. If you want, you could come over and you could stand, or you could use mine, or you could just turn around, whichever you feel comfortable with.
Thank you so much. I can speak without microphone. Thank you so much. I think that we had very good conversation with President Trump.
Very good.
And it really was the best one. Maybe the best one will be in the future. But it was really good. And we spoke about very sensitive points. The first one is security guarantees. And we are very happy with President that all the leaders are here, and the security in Ukraine depends on the United States and on you and on those leaders who are with us in our hearts. They have been online before yesterday, and etc. So a lot of countries on the side of Ukraine, our people, and all of us want to finish this war, stop Russia and stop this war. We spoke about it, and we will speak more about security guarantees. This is very important that the United States gives such strong signal and is ready for security guarantees. The second point, or maybe the first, humanitarian direction, very important to exchange all the prisoners, and I think that President will help. And I was very thankful to your wife again, Mr. President, for the letter about our abducted children, and I hope that really it can be a historic role for the people to bring kids back to the families and be happy and
get the people back, yeah.
Yes, this is so important, and I'm happy that we discussed it, this track with the President Trump, and I hope that we will find decisions. And then what is very important, that all the sensitive things, territorial, etc., we will discuss on the level of leaders during trilateral meeting, and President Trump will try to organize such meeting, and he said that he will come or not come. Ukraine will be happy if you will participate.
Want me there, I will be there. Yeah,
yeah,
you know that.
Thank you. And I think this is very important. Yes, so security guarantees, bringing kids back, and all our people, not only warriors, first of all warriors, and all the civilians, journalists, a lot of people in prison. So we need them back. And guarantees which will work for the years. We spoke about it. And I showed the President a lot of details on the battlefield, on the map. Thank you so much. Thank you for the map, by the way.
Good map.
It was great. Yeah. I'm thinking how to take it back.
We'll get you.
No. I think that we had constructive, specific meeting, and I'm very thankful to all the leaders who are here, and you help a lot, and so we are happy that we have such big unity today. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much,
for hosting us.
Mr. President. I think you'll see that President Putin really would like to do something else. I think when we set that up, when we do, I think it's going to be when, not if. I think you're going to see some really positive moves. I know there's over 1,000 prisoners, and I know they're going to release them. Maybe they're going to release them very soon, like immediately, which I think is great. But we're going to set that up today after this meeting. So very good and great remarks. I appreciate it. Mark, as head of NATO, maybe you could say a few words, please.
Yes, I will be very brief. I really want to thank you, President of the United States, dear Donald, for the fact that you, as I said before, broke the deadlock, basically, with President Putin by starting that dialogue. And I think it was in February that you had the first phone call, and from there we are now where we are today. And that is, I think, if we play this well, we could end this. And we have to end this. We have to stop the killing. We have to stop the destruction of Ukraine's infrastructure. It is a terrible war. So I'm really excited. And let's make the best out of today and make sure that from today onwards, we get this thing to an end as soon as possible. I really want to thank you for your leadership, what you are doing for Volodymyr, but of course also all the European colleagues. It is really crucial. And the fact that you have said, I'm willing to participate in the security guarantees is a big step. It's really a breakthrough, and it makes all the difference. So also thank you for that.
Well, NATO also has agreed from 2% to 5%, which is something that is a massive amount of money. And it's 2% that wasn't always paid to 5% that is paid. That's a big difference. And so we appreciate that. That was a great move. Thank you very much. Ursula, maybe on behalf of the Commission, you could say a couple of words.
Yes. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. And it's a very important moment. Indeed, we are here, Europeans, as friends and allies. We had a fantastic NATO summit. Together as the two largest and biggest economies in the world, we had the largest trade deal ever agreed. And now we are here to work together with you on a just and lasting peace for Ukraine. Stop the killing. This is really our common interest, stop the killing. And indeed, it's very good to hear that we're working on the security guarantees, Article 5 life security guarantees, so important. But I want to thank you also that you mentioned the thousands of Ukrainian children that have been abducted. And as a mother and grandmother, every single child has to go back to its family. This should be one of our main priorities also in these negotiations, to make sure that the children come back to Ukraine, to their families.
Thank you. And we did. I was just thinking we're here for a different reason, but we just a couple of weeks ago made the largest trade deal in history. So that's a big thing, and congratulations. That's great. Thank you very much, Ursula. Mr. Chancellor from Germany, a very great leader.
Mr. President, dear Donald, many thanks for having us today. I think this is extremely helpful that we are meeting and hearing that the two of you are having such a good meeting today here in Washington. The next steps ahead are the more complicated ones now. The path is open. You opened it last Friday. But now the way is open for complicated negotiations. And to be honest, we all would like to see a ceasefire, the latest from the next meeting on. I can't imagine that the next meeting would take place without a ceasefire. So let's work on that, and let's try to put pressure on Russia, because the credibility of these efforts we are undertaking today, are depending on at least a ceasefire from the beginning of the serious negotiations from next step on. So I would like to emphasize this aspect and would like to see a ceasefire from the next meeting, which should be a trilateral meeting wherever it takes place.
Well, we're going to let the president go over and talk to the president, and we'll see how that works out, and if we can do that. I will say, and again I say it, in the 6 wars that I've settled, I haven't had a ceasefire. We just got into negotiations, and one of the wars was, as you know, in the Congo was 31 years long. Another one that we settled last week with 2 great countries was 35 years going on, and we had no ceasefire. So if we can do the ceasefire, great. And if we don't do a ceasefire, because many other points were given to us, many points were given to us, great points. Please, Georgia, go ahead.
Well, thank you very much, Donald, Mr. President, for hosting us today in this important meeting. And I think it is an important day, a new phase, after 3 years and a half that we didn't see any kind of sign from the Russian side that there was a willing for dialogue. So something is changing, something has changed, thanks to you. Thanks also to the stalling in the battlefield, which was achieved with the bravery of Ukrainians and with the unity that we all provided to Ukraine. And the reason why I mention it is that we also have to remind that if we want to reach peace and if we want to guarantee justice, we have to do it united. So that's why it's a very good day, the one we are in. You can obviously count on Italy as it was from the beginning. We are on the side of Ukraine, and we do absolutely support your efforts towards peace. We will talk about many important topics. The first one is security guarantees, how to be sure that it won't happen again, which is the precondition of every kind of peace. I'm happy that we will discuss about that. I'm happy that we will begin from a proposal, which is the, let's say, Article 5 model, which was Italian at the beginning. So we are always ready to bring our proposals for peace, for dialogue. It's something we have to build together to guarantee peace and to defend the security of our nation. So thank you, Mr. President, for hosting us.
Thank you very much. Emmanuel?
Thank you, Mr. President, for organizing this meeting and for your commitment. And everything was said, but I just have to say here, everybody around this table is in favor of peace. And we work very hard, and we've worked very hard during the past few years to have a peace which is a robust and long-standing peace. This is why the idea of a trilateral meeting is very important, because this is the only way to fix it. And by the way, I think as a follow-up, we would need probably a quadrilateral meeting, because when we speak about security guarantees, we speak about the whole security of the European continent. And this is why we are all united here with Ukraine on this matter. In order to organize such a trilateral meeting, your idea to ask for a truce or a ceasefire, at least to stop the killings, as we discussed, is a necessity. And we all support this idea. And in order to have such a long-standing peace for Ukraine and for the whole continent, we do need these security guarantees. And the first one is clearly a credible Ukrainian army for the years and decades to come. And the second one is our own commitment, all of us. And we worked very hard during the past few months among the coalition of the willings with the support of NATO to build the different pillars of security guarantees and our commitments. And you can be sure that the Europeans are very lucid about the fact that they have their fair share in these security guarantees for Ukraine, but their own security is clearly at stake in this situation. So you can count on us, as we can count on you, in order to deliver this robust peace for both Ukraine and Europe.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. Mr. Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you for hosting us here. Can I start where Emmanuel started, which is we all want peace. The war in Ukraine has had a huge impact, particularly on the Ukrainians who've borne the brunt of it, but it's also had an impact on Europe and on the United Kingdom. There's not a family or community that hasn't been affected. And when we talk about security, we're talking about the security not just of Ukraine, we're talking about the security of Europe and the United Kingdom as well, which is why this is such an important issue. I think this is such an important meeting. As a group, I think we've had a discussion on the phone a number of times, Mr. President, but be able now to be around the table to take it forward. And I really feel that we can, I think, with the right approach this afternoon, make real progress, particularly on the security guarantees. And your indication of security guarantees, of some sort of Article 5 style guarantees, fits with what we've been doing with the Coalition of the Willing, which we started some months ago, bringing countries together and showing that we were prepared to step up to the plate when it came to security. With you coming alongside, the US alongside what we've already developed, I think we could take a really important step forward today. A historic step, actually, could come out of this meeting in terms of security for Ukraine and security in Europe. I also feel that we can make real progress towards a just and lasting outcome. Obviously, that has to involve Ukraine, and a trilateral meeting seems the sensible next step. So thank you for being prepared to take that forward, because I think if we can ensure that that is the progress out of this meeting, both security guarantees and some sort of progress on trilateral meeting of some sort to bring some of the difficult issues to a head, then I think today will be seen as a very important day in recent years in relation to a conflict which has gone on for 3 and a bit years, and so far nobody's been able to bring it to this point. So I thank you for that.
Well, thank you very much. And, you know, it's very interesting because this is the first for the White House. You can't say that very often. It's seen a lot over the years, since 1800, 1799, to be almost exact. But this is the first where we've had so many prime ministers, presidents, the heads of European nations. And by the way, Alex, I'd like you to say a couple of words, too. You're a young, powerful man. Before I finish up, I want you to say a couple of words. Go ahead.
I'll take the notion of youth back to my wife and try to convince her. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I think in the past 2 weeks, we've probably had more progress in ending this war than we have in the past 3.5 years. And I think the fact that we're around this table today is very much symbolic in the sense that it's Team Europe and Team United States helping Ukraine. And the progress that we're looking out of this meeting is about the security guarantees, which are a big part of this. And then, of course, moving towards a process with a trilateral meeting with you and President Putin and President Zelenskyy. Some of the international media might wonder, why is the president of Finland here? I think the reason is probably that we might come from a small country, but we have a long border with Russia, over 800 miles. And we, of course, have our own historical experience with Russia from World War II, the Winter War and the War of Continuation. And if I look at the silver lining of where we stand right now, we found a solution in 1944, and I'm sure that we'll be able to find a solution in 2025 to end Russia's war of aggression and find and get a lasting and just peace. The situation is very difficult, but that's why we're here.
Thank you, Alex, very much. Good job. So we're going to be meeting for a while, and we're going to discuss some of the issues. And I don't think there's any issue that's overly complex. It's at a point now where people want to do things. I really do believe. I've known him for a long time. I've always had a great relationship with him. I think that President Putin wants to find an answer too. And we'll see. And in a certain period of time, not very far from now, a week or 2 weeks, we're going to know whether or not we're going to solve this, or is this horrible fighting going to continue. We'll do our best to get it ended. And I believe you have 2 willing parties, and usually that's good news, but 2 willing parties that want to make a deal. And we'll journey together, and we'll go over, and we'll see if it can be done. And it's possible it might not be able to be done. On the other hand, it's possible it will, and we're going to save thousands and thousands of lives a week. And so it's something we really have to do. And or at least we have to give it our best. It's all you can do. You can give it your best, but I think we may have a very good outcome. So I want to thank you all, and the media, I want to thank you. We're going to be staying here for a little while. Then we're going to walk over to the Oval Office, and we're going to have another little discussion about similar matters. And then they're going to go home to their great countries and report. And I'm going to remain here and work, and you're going to go and work. We're all going to be working. We may be in a different location, but that's what we know how to do is work. But I want to thank the media. Has been actually very fair, generally speaking, very fair. I think it's important that they're fair because this is a very important subject. We have to get it ended. And so that's all we ask for is fairness with the media. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
All right, you are watching what just wrapped up a roundtable of President Trump, Ukrainian President Zelenskyy, and a host of European leaders there trying to come to an agreement in terms of how best to end this war that Russia is waging on Ukraine. The president there giving the floor to each of the leaders around the table there to say their piece. We heard from the president saying essentially that an immediate ceasefire is not happening currently. He also said that Europe will take a lot of the burden whenever it comes to defending and providing those security guarantees for Ukraine. He also announced that he believed that Russia would accept security measures for Ukraine from Western forces, and also telegraphed that this deal, if it goes forward, could include a possible exchange of territory. And for more on all of this, I want to bring in our White House correspondent Karen Travers, who was listening in with me as the president and these other world leaders were speaking. And Karen, I'm curious, I mean, what stood out to you?
There are still some big outstanding points that we don't.
I think, Alex, that this was really the president there to listen, and they're going to actually have a conversation now, and that there weren't conclusions that were reached after the president had that Oval Office meeting with President Zelenskyy, that now they brought in the European leaders. They're going to have a discussion that he said might go for a while. So we now need to wait to see what comes out of this and whether or not they can move the ball forward and get closer to that peace agreement that all of the leaders indicated there that they very much want to see happen. You heard several say they want to see a ceasefire agreement because they want to see the fighting and the killing stop while the bigger negotiations, the really challenging negotiations over those things you mentioned, like territory and security guarantees, all of that will likely take a while, and they would like to see a ceasefire in place while that plays out. The president, for weeks, had been indicating he wanted to see a ceasefire. He was putting pressure on Vladimir Putin to get to that point, even threatening him with severe consequences if he did not agree to it. But he has backed away from that. Alex, you heard the president there say, if we can get a ceasefire, great, but also didn't indicate he was doing anything to put more pressure on Vladimir Putin to agree to that. The president, though, said that the two big things on the table for these conversations now taking place are security guarantees. He said they would be talking about that Europe would likely be taking the brunt of that because that is their neighborhood, essentially. We've heard this a lot from the president, but that the United States would be helping, that the United States would be involved in this. What that looks like, we still don't know. And then the other big issue, of course, is the territory. Ukraine right now has little of Russian territory, while Russia has about 20% in Ukraine. So that's kind of a mismatch there when you look at what the president keeps referring to as land swaps, not exactly maybe the most accurate way of potentially coming to the table for a conversation like that. But the president said that they would be talking about that. And Alex, I thought it was interesting. The president said the war lines are pretty obvious right now. He didn't explain what he means by that, but I think that was certainly following up that social media post from last night saying that if Zelenskyy wanted to end this war right now, he could, by conceding territory at this point to Russia. Alex?
Yeah, something else that was notable about that was Zelensky's body language during that particular point in the president's remarks. I want to bring in our D.C. Bureau Managing Editor, Catherine Falders, who is also listening in on this. And Catherine, one of the things that stood out to me as these world leaders each held the floor, we heard from German Chancellor Merz, who talked about the next steps being complicated. We just heard from Catherine, from Karen, who really just kind of outlined how a ceasefire doesn't seem imminent. But Merz said, "I can't imagine the next meeting will happen if there is not a ceasefire in this next meeting." That next meeting being the trilateral between the U.S., Russia, and Ukraine. I mean, what did you make of that?
Especially because where this all started out, at least a week ago, right, where nothing really was on the table with Putin unless he agreed to a ceasefire. Well, clearly that didn't happen in the summit that they had last week in Alaska. And then what you just mentioned and what we heard from Karen, too, is that Trump was saying, I don't think a ceasefire is necessary. Well, you heard from the German chancellor, who, of course, said what you just said there, that I don't think there's going to be a trilateral meeting unless we have this. This is really what we should try and get to. He literally said, so let's work on that. Let's try to put pressure on Russia, because the credibility of this effort, these efforts we are undertaking today, are depending on at least a ceasefire from the beginning of the serious negotiations from the next steps. And then you heard also from the French president, who then backed that up, what the German chancellor was saying. So I do think that while Trump is trying to rule this out a bit, frankly, and back away from this condition, you could pretty much tell that at least some of those around the table think that this should be an absolute condition for that next trilateral meeting between President Putin, Zelensky, and Donald Trump. So I'll be interested to see at least hear what happens behind closed doors when they all have those discussions. But you did hear from those leaders, those European leaders, who seem pretty adamant on that being a condition for any sit down between Zelensky, Putin, and Trump.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And Tom, I want to bring in Tom Soufi-Burge, our foreign correspondent. As the President Trump has said that the ceasefire is not happening currently, he did say in his meeting with Zelensky that this war is going to end and that he believed that Vladimir Putin wanted it to end. But right now, I mean, is there any indication from Putin's actions or Russia's aggression that they seem to want peace?
Totally the opposite. I mean, look, I've studied this war. I've followed it from 2014, to be honest, when I used to live in Ukraine shortly after that. I mean, look, there is absolutely no sign on the ground right now that the Russian military is pulling back. Quite the opposite. They are making slow progress in the eastern Donbass region of Ukraine. It's not an easy war for Russia. Russia hasn't done well throughout many phases of this war. I think, what I heard just there, I thought one of the things that really stuck out to me, I think we got a sense of the timeline of how Trump and those European leaders, it was fascinating hearing from each one of them, see this playing out. I mean, today they're meeting, they are purely, I think, or largely focusing, from what they said, on the security guarantees question, what support the US and Europe are willing to give to the Ukrainian army to build it up, and then also for this reassurance force on the ground to deter Russia from attacking Ukraine in the future if there were to be a deal. But we did get a sense from President Trump that, only in the trilateral meeting will the territorial question really come in, because that has to be a question that Ukraine has to discuss, and only Ukraine can decide on that. And I think at least on that point, President Trump was really on message from a European point of view that only Ukraine's leadership can decide if there are going to be territorial concessions.
I want to bring in Daryl Blocker to talk more about the ceasefire. And Daryl, President Trump has said that he never needed a ceasefire in ending other wars. I mean, what did you make of that statement?
Okay, so I'm not quite sure what the president is talking about. I know Iran is one where he can claim that a ceasefire was reached and hostilities they're no longer killing each other. India flat out denies that the United States had any role. The M23 rebels are still killing people in the Eastern Congo. Egypt and Ethiopia have been fighting over the Nile for a very, very long time. So I don't want to tell the president that a ceasefire is necessary, but I think history has proven otherwise. I don't think you can have people killing each other and sitting down at the same time negotiating on how to stop killing each other. That is the first step, and I'm really glad that the European leaders all showed up in the way that they did, and that they are continuing to stress to the president that a ceasefire absolutely is an imperative for the next steps in this process.
Daryl, I appreciate that. I want to swing this to our chief global affairs correspondent and anchor of This Week, Martha Raddatz, who's with us. And Martha, I mean, you were listening in on this, and certainly this extraordinary scene playing out as we're hearing from all of these European leaders kind of hold the floor for a moment. The president saying that an immediate ceasefire is not happening currently, but we also heard from Chancellor Merz, who said that he didn't really see this trilateral happening between the U.S., Russia, and Ukraine unless a ceasefire was agreed to. I'm curious, what was your take on that, and also what else stood out to you?
Well, I think as far as the ceasefire goes, as we all know, going into the summit with Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump said he wanted a ceasefire, and he wanted it rapidly. And if there wasn't a ceasefire, there would be severe consequences. But he came out of that meeting with Vladimir Putin talking about a peace agreement and certainly no ceasefire. So that is where we are. And he said, just a couple of hours ago that he did not think a ceasefire was necessary. I think it's really important to make the point that Chancellor Merz made as well. Without a ceasefire, as you're in peace negotiations, the killing continues. Russia invaded Ukraine. They continue to kill people in Ukraine, including civilians and a child in the most recent attack. So that is the difference between working towards a peace agreement while people are dying or getting a ceasefire first. Vladimir Putin clearly didn't want a ceasefire. He didn't want to agree to a ceasefire. As far as the trilateral meeting, if they get one, that would be very, very important and very, very significant. But just as recently as last August 7th, Vladimir Putin said, I have reiterated that I have nothing against that on a whole, and he's talking about a trilateral. However, certain conditions should be created to do that. Regrettably, there is still a long haul ahead for the creation of such conditions, Putin told reporters or tasked Russian media on August 7th. So I don't know what could possibly change his mind on that, but maybe the pressure of all those European leaders, the pressure from how well that meeting with Zelenskyy seemed to go. And I think Zelenskyy has clearly learned a lot of lessons and a lot more about Donald Trump and the way Donald Trump wants to be treated in the White House. He was very gracious, Zelenskyy. He wore a suit. He was asked to wear a suit. We remember last time that was a big deal, and they were trying to humiliate him because he is a wartime president, and he showed up without a suit. He did that. He thanked America. He thanked Donald Trump again and again, and said the meeting had gone well. He focused on the positive of that meeting. Didn't really talk about the territorial swap, which is a huge concern. Security is a huge concern, too, a huge concern for him, but also any kind of land swap, that's going to be where the details are. And even with the security, and I'm listening very carefully to Donald Trump here when he talks about security and that the United States would help, I find it really hard to believe that he would actually send U.S. troops to the front line and be part of that. Help could mean weapons, help could mean defensive weapons, help could be something, or more intelligence sharing, or contractors helping. But I think it would be very hard to imagine that we would send U.S. troops over there as a security force, but we'll have to see.
Well, and Martha, to that point, he was asked earlier, whenever it was just Zelenskyy and the president in the Oval Office, if he would send U.S. peacemakers. He kind of danced around that, but also when Zelenskyy talked about some of the U.S. weaponry, he really kind of underscored that was something that he knew the Ukrainians appreciated. So certainly something there. But as you were talking about basically Europe saying that it's going to be taking a lot of this burden on, and the possible exchange of territory. We saw a change in demeanor of Zelenskyy there. He looked like he put his head down almost. Certainly kind of piped up whenever they talked about the prisoner exchange, but it's clear that this is something that he's now kind of grappling with in these negotiations.
And as he should be. I mean, this is a very key point. First of all, he can't just give up land. Most Ukrainians don't want him to give up land. We're talking about land here that Ukraine has right now. Russia is not occupying that land. So giving that up, and it's a vital area for the defense of Ukraine. So I think that is really where they're going here and what will be the most difficult thing. And again, and you know that I interviewed, Marco Rubio just yesterday. And Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, said we're still a long ways off from a peace agreement. I mean, we're not at the precipice of a peace agreement. So you have to keep that in mind as well. There's sort of different messages coming out of the White House. You heard President Trump today feeling pretty optimistic about the possibilities. It could happen. It could happen soon. I hope it happens soon. But the pressure on Russia now, and that is a big question. What is the pressure on Russia now? Other than seeing all these European leaders and Zelenskyy say we stand together and we're happy to have the United States stand with us on these security measures, but it is now in Vladimir Putin's court. Today it was certainly in Zelenskyy's court, whether or not he will attend that trilateral meeting or not. And that is clearly the next step here. So if he doesn't, then we'll have to see what President Trump's next move will be.
Yeah. All right, Martha Raddatz, I appreciate that. I want to bring in Chief Foreign Correspondent Ian Pannell, who is also listening in on this. And Ian, as we talk about this potential exchange of territory, certainly there was a visible reaction by Zelenskyy inside that room as that was being discussed publicly. But I mean, what could this potentially look like?
Yeah, and I think we need to be clear, because there's lots of discussion. It's a phrase that's used by Donald Trump about a land swap. I mean, the reality is that Russia occupies 20%, 1/5 of Ukrainian land. What you're asking is for President Zelenskyy to surrender part of his own territory, 1/5 of the country. Imagine what that would look like in the United States. And as Martha says, there are constitutional restrictions on that. And Ukrainians, having suffered so much in blood and treasure, not just over the last 3.5 years, over the last 11 years, having given up their nuclear arsenal back in '94 in exchange for security promises, they'll be very loath to do that. Zelenskyy knows that's a very difficult sell. Now, the reality is that most of the land that's occupied by Russia at the moment is Crimea, this kind of southern peninsula, and Donbass, which is in the east of the country. It's the industrial heartland of the nation, and Donbass is divided into, just think about it like two states. You have Luhansk and you have Donetsk. The Russians already occupy about 90% of Luhansk and about 70% of Donetsk. Now, what we learned, and various other media organizations had similar reporting, is that Putin was asking for the entirety of that in exchange for ceasing fire on the other front lines and stopping the kind of attacks that we've just seen even earlier today in Kharkiv, where civilians are being slaughtered in their beds. Now, that is, again, totally unsellable. No one's going to agree to hand over to Russia what they've been unable to achieve on the battlefield, not least because, again, as Martha mentioned, Ukrainian defensive positions absolutely depend on it. And what else is Ukraine going to get back in return? It's conceivable you have a scenario where you go, OK, you take Donbass, you keep what you've got, and in exchange, Russia withdraws from two other key areas, Zaporizhia and Kherson. That looks like a gift. But of course it's not, because it's all occupied territory. If I come into your house and grab an armful of goods and say, oh, actually, you know what, you can have this teapot and this kettle and this microwave back, there you go, you've won. It doesn't work. It's not a credible alternative. And so that's the huge dilemma. Martha's right. The land is going to be the toughest part of this. But also, let's wait and hear from the Kremlin what they say about security guarantees, because even today, Maria Zakharova, who's the spokesperson for the Russian Foreign Ministry, said Article 5 type security guarantees are absolutely out. Russia will not accept that. In many senses, that was the basis of Russia's justification for the invasion in the first place, was seeing a NATO encroachment. Whether it's NATO or not, having Article 5 guarantees seems a very difficult thing for the Kremlin to swallow. So we need to find out more before we start celebrating peace in our time.
Yeah, well, and that was a very good point, Ian, because even yesterday we heard from Emmanuel Macron saying that Ukraine, if they were to give up land, it would be capitulation, and it's something that they shouldn't have to do. But I want to swing this to our senior political correspondent, Rachel Scott, who's also been following along here. And look, I mean, Rachel, I mean, all of this building up to, something that both sides have said that they hope will happen, this trilateral meeting. I mean, at this point, what are the odds that this happens?
Well, the president seems quite optimistic that this is a possibility. And look, there's been a lot building up to this moment. The president having these discussions with both of these leaders separately now for months. And then finally having this historic summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Zelenskyy then coming here on the heels of that summit. And he's backed up by all of these European leaders and the allies. And they talked a lot about this trilateral meeting. Pretty much everyone at that table believes it's something that could happen as a step toward peace, but also just how they get there is still a big question. I thought it was very notable that we heard from the German chancellor saying that you really can't have this trilateral meeting or these serious peace negotiations without having a ceasefire first. The president has been back and forth on that. We have talked about that. Initially, he said he wanted to see that immediate ceasefire rapidly. Now he is saying that it maybe is something that can come after they have these peace negotiations and that trilateral meeting, essentially punting that down the road even further. Those are the things that they're going to be discussing inside of the room right now, in addition to all of the security guarantees. Now, there's a question of how much the United States is involved. The president is very much warming up to the idea that the United States will provide some sort of security guarantee. One idea that, of course, is being floated is this idea of Article 5, which obviously is from the NATO alliance, meaning an attack on one is an attack on all. It's unclear if they would go that far and if Putin would accept that as part of this potential peace agreement, Alex.
Rachel, I appreciate that. And for one more, I want to go to presidential historian Mark Updegrove, who has also been listening in as this is played out this afternoon. And Mark, one of the things that I'm kind of curious about, President Trump has really kind of inserted himself into the situation as a peacemaker, a peace dealer, if you will, and really kind of even publicly campaigned for a Nobel Peace Prize over this. So I'm curious, what does this meeting mean for his legacy?
Well, it depends on where it goes from here. But what I thought was stunning today, Alex, is the change in attitude from Donald Trump toward President Zelenskyy, toward our NATO allies, and toward the media. Tremendously different. I mean, you think about the meeting that President Trump had with President Zelenskyy back in February. Right before that, President Trump had called Zelenskyy a dictator and had blamed him for the aggression in Ukraine. And then we saw that ambush in the Oval Office in the February meeting. And then you saw a very conciliatory, very diplomatic Donald Trump showing affection towards Zelenskyy today. Same with NATO. There's been a very aggressive posture that Trump has had toward our NATO allies in the past. NATO was very much weakened in Trump's first term in office due to the fact that America was not leading NATO. It didn't seem to matter much to Donald Trump. Today, he said, we're all working toward the same goal, and it showed this great sign of a show of unity with our leaders. And finally, the media, who Donald Trump has called the enemy of the people and constantly decries the fake news. And he thanked the media today. I'm not sure I've ever heard Donald Trump thank the media again, and said that the coverage was very fair. The question that remains is, what will his posture toward Vladimir Putin be in the wake of this meeting? That's the great question here. Will he play tough as the meeting is going to last?
Yeah, Mark, that's a very good point. I can't quite recall the last time the president has been grateful for the media as well, or even lauded the coverage. But certainly appreciate your reflection there. We're going to have more continuing coverage of this historic meeting between President Trump, President Zelenskyy, and European leaders right after the break.
I'd never seen that many skeletal remains. Thousands. It's a serial killer case.
This killer, he's the Dahmer you've never heard of.
More and more men are going missing, and then the lead broke the case open. They discovered the farm.
The whole place was so bizarre.
There were mannequins, almost like it was a club.
I felt the presence of evil.
The largest number of unidentified human remains, second only to the World Trade Center.
Not many people live to tell about their involvement with the serial killer.
Everything we know about this case comes from you.
Absolutely. Let's not do that. Ooh, I'm sorry. Never before a face-to-face interview with a camera.
Why now?
Let me ask you, am I the evil culprit, the accomplice? I'd like to know how the audience views me.
The Fox Hollow Murders, Playground of a Serial Killer. Only on Hulu.
I did not picture myself surviving through that day.
He was tracking her.
He was everywhere. I heard the squeak of a floorboard. I've been kidnapped. This becomes a fight for my life.
And we're all holding our breath.
My mind is the only thing that's going to get me out of here. This is a horror film.
Stalking Samantha, 13 Years of Terror. Only on Hulu.
The peaceful silence in Kafue National Park was pierced by a gunshot.
There's been a horrible tragic accident.
His wife was shot dead.
There were a number of factors that indicated that this was not an accident. They thought they had gotten away with it for years.
This call is from a federal prison.
I relive this every day in my mind.
I still can't believe it turned out the way it did.
Trophy Wife, Murder on Safari. Only on Hulu.
Breaking news this afternoon. It's a critical day for the future of Europe. I'm Alex Perchet in Washington, and that is our top story this hour. President Trump is meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy at the White House 6 months after that disastrous Oval Office meeting that ended in a screaming match. The multilateral meeting between Trump, Zelenskyy, and European allies just wrapped a short time ago. The leaders speaking about the progress made in ending Russia's war and the role that all countries play in supporting Ukraine. And while Trump appears to be backing away from a ceasefire deal and lowering expectations for one, we did hear one main message coming from all leaders. Ukraine must receive security guarantees. Take a listen.
In order to have such a long-standing peace for Ukraine and for the whole continent, we do need these security guarantees.
We will talk about many important topics. The first one is security guarantees, how to be sure that it won't happen again.
When we talk about security, we're talking about the security not just of Ukraine, we're talking about the security of Europe and the United Kingdom as well.
This meeting comes just days after Trump's historic summit with Putin on U.S. soil, a summit that saw no ceasefire, no tangible results, and if anything, saw the president take a similar view on the war as the Russian leader. But is Trump's tune changing once again? For more on this, I want to bring in White House correspondent Karen Travers, foreign correspondent Tom Sophie-Burge, and contributor and former senior CIA field operative Daryl Blocker. And Karen, I want to start with you. What do you make of today's meeting, and could anything substantive have come from this?
No, we'll find out hopefully after that meeting wraps with the European leaders. The president, I think, was pretty careful to not say that there were any conclusions after his meeting with President Zelenskyy, that he really wanted this to be a conversation with the European leaders who had traveled a great distance to come here for this very quickly scheduled meeting with Zelenskyy, because they're all stakeholders. They have a lot of significant input in this, and the president has and his team have indicated that the United States wants to be mediators to try to get to an end for this conflict. But the president did say that the big things that would be discussed once the press left the room were those security guarantees that you mentioned. And he said today in the East Room and also in the Oval Office with President Zelenskyy that Europe would be taking the lead on this, that they would bear the brunt of it, be the first line of defense, as he put it earlier, but that the United States would be involved. The United States would be helping with this security guarantees, but he didn't give details, Alex, of what that would look like and how the United States would would be contributing. Obviously, Ukraine is not in NATO, so it's not clear what that would look like in terms of peacekeeping forces. The other big issue on the table, the president said, was territory and how that could be potentially divided as the peace agreement comes together. Ukraine, European leaders have been very clear they don't want to see Ukraine give up territory. That is something, though, that the Russian leader told the president he would like to see as part of this peace agreement.
Well, and Tom, despite these talks, Russia has continued to attack Ukraine. Over the weekend, it launched missiles and drones. And then even this morning, we got a tweet from Zelenskyy saying that 2 attacks had resulted in the deaths of at least 10 Ukrainians here. I mean, what's the latest on the battlefield?
Well, Russian troops, Alex, are moving steadily but very slowly forward in Ukraine's eastern Donetsk region. And that is the territory that if we get to this trilateral meeting between Putin and Zelenskyy and Trump, in theory, what we learned today is that only then will this kind of intractable territorial question come up, and the Russians have, now put this idea on the table that they are now asking for Ukraine to hand over the rest of the Donetsk region, which is part of the Donbass. And I mean, for Ukraine, that's a very, very hard sell. It'd be an incredibly hard swallow for the Ukrainians after 3 years, actually really 10 years, given when this conflict really began, of sacrifice. And, for the Ukrainian president himself to sell that, very, very difficult to see. I mean, look, I think the other important thing, which I really stuck out to me from this array of statements from European leaders, was the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. He also said, let's work together to put pressure on Russia. We didn't hear the word sanctions, I don't think, at all from any of the leaders. And I think that's telling. Not long ago, Donald Trump was talking up the prospect of much tougher sanctions on Russia. That was the only thinly veiled reference by the German leader, basically pleading to Trump to actually, put pressure jointly with Europe on Russia to actually get a result in these negotiations.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, Tom. And Daryl, I want to ask you, what do you make of President Trump lowering essentially expectations here of a ceasefire? I mean, is there any way to reach a peace otherwise?
Alex, I honestly think is one of the smartest things this administration has done. When you play out negotiations in the press, then expectations kind of get out of control. So when the president went in and talked about sanctions against them, about all the things that were going to happen, and then all of a sudden none of it transpires, then the world looks at him and says he's not serious. The way the Russian look at him is he's not only not serious, as in we basically still have the upper hand on this. We still can manipulate him. We still can provide him with something to think that he's just sending his own message, but he's really touting what the Russians really want at the end of the day, which is concessions of land, which is to subjugate Ukraine and all the Ukrainians.
All right, Daryl, Karen, Tom, appreciate you all. And coming up after the break, we're going to switch gears here. Mandatory evacuations underway ahead of Hurricane Aaron. We'll tell you what you need to know.
You never take evidence home, Morgan.
What? He's wearing gloves. You hired me because I noticed things that you missed.
We're not partners.
Non-romantic partner.
She's actually just a consultant.
Bingo.
Let's solve this case.
LAPD! The fun has just begun.
It's not terrifying at all.